This episode of Recording Studio Rockstars is brought to you by Isotope, Native Instruments, Atom Audio, and SAE Institute Nashville. You're hearing my voice right now mixed through Isotope, RX, Ozone, and Neutron on Atom Audio monitors and headphones. Please check out our awesome sponsors using the links in the show notes below, and like and subscribe to our YouTube channel and leave us a comment. It's a great way for you to help support this show. Now get ready to rock. What does it mean the magic is in the mid-range?
It is something that I stole from Jack Joseph Puig.
Love it.
I saw him, and I've talked about this on the channel. I talked about earlier in this episode where hitting F12 was the most mentorship I ever had. That was really until Pensado's Place came out.
Yeah.
Those early episodes of Pensado's Place, that was such a life-changing thing for me, because then you got to actually hear what these dudes that you idolized, what they were actually doing, the gear they were actually using, how they actually mic'd something up.
Yeah.
Jack Joseph Puig, he broke my brain in that episode back then. Talking about compression, talking about the mid-range, I must have watched that episode 15 times before I felt like I was starting to understand everything that he said.
Welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is the podcast created to help you become a rock star of the recording studio. Native Instruments supercharges your music production with Complete 15 featuring Contact 8 new machine hardware integration and cutting-edge synths, samples, and effects. Contact 8 now gives you the chords and phrases tool for instant inspiration, the Leap tool for dynamic looping, and Conflux, a hybrid instrument for blending organic and synth textures. Plus, Machine 3.0 is here, giving you seamless control over Native Instruments gear and the latest NKS-supported hardware. Use the code ROCK10 for 10% off at nativeinstruments.com. Howdy, Rockstars. It's Lid Shaw, and welcome back to Recording Studio Rockstars, bringing you into the studio so that we can learn from recording professionals so that you can make your best record ever and be a rock star of the studio yourself. My guest today is Colt Capperrune, a producer, mix engineer, and mastering engineer with 21 years of experience in the music industry. Colt is a talented session guitarist, a passionate advocate for artist development as well. In recent years, he's gained recognition as a social media influencer, sharing invaluable insights and tutorials through his popular YouTube channel. Colt produced his first record at 19 years old and has since achieved top 40 on Billboard, multiple number ones on iTunes and Amazon charts, and has worked with countless artists to turn raw ideas into polished professional productions. His expertise extends to Dolby Atmos mixing, and he's recently built a state-of-the-art Atmos-equipped studio to deliver immersive audio experiences, taking his productions to the next level. Beyond the studio, Colt is committed to empowering artists, often showcasing his process of transforming simple work tapes into chart-worthy productions on his website and YouTube channel, one of my favorite things to do also. You can hear Colt's previous interview where he shared his backstory and told us all about how he got started in this on Recording Studio Rockstars RSR501 episode. So please welcome Colt Capperrune to Recording Studio Rockstars. Again, Colt, are you ready to rock?
I am ready to rock.
Dude, it's good to have you here, man.
Thank you.
It's great to have you back.
Thank you.
And it's really nice to have you here joining us in the new video studio.
This looks so great.
Which I don't know what the name is, but I might be running with Dragonfly.
Okay.
Possibly.
This feels like a wonderful place to have a conversation.
It's pretty cozy, man. It's pretty cozy.
I love it.
We had a few names for it, like Podzilla and Pod Damn It, but both of those are taken. All it took was a quick search, and it was like, oh, somebody already did that.
Naming things nowadays, I feel like, is the hardest thing in the world because everything's been taken.
Yeah. Well, doing a video podcast myself and moving from 10 years of audio podcast to a video podcast, I've learned a few things. I've learned that it essentially, I just 10x'd my workload. So right at a point where I was like, boy, I got this dialed in. It'd be nice to like, to sit back and take a little bit of a break on some things. I was like, nah, you know what? Instead, I'm actually going to double down and make this like way harder.
Let's make everything harder. Well, hopefully, I mean, I feel like the potential might be 10x your viewership. Hopefully.
It'd be nice. I mean, what would be cool for me is just simply connecting with more people. Not because you look at your numbers and you go, look at my numbers. Sure. Look how many likes I got on this post. And,
sure.
Aren't I cool? It's like the fact that on a platform like YouTube or watching this in the future, whatever video platform we're on, because, things change as you go.
Of course.
Is like, it's cool to be able to have comments and back and forth and conversations with everybody who's enjoying it.
Absolutely. And I feel like the discoverability on YouTube is really fascinating because even though some people can have a real hard time getting traction on YouTube, YouTube wants you to succeed. They are constantly trying to find who your video is for and then put your video in front of those people because that's how they make money. They want to keep people watching YouTube videos so they can see more ads is really what it is.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it does make me wonder if having an audio podcast with long form content is a good way to go because of the simple fact that you're actually, enjoying it for a long period of time. Of course.
Yeah. It's, I don't know how far into this you want to go, if at all. The main things that make a YouTube video work are the click-through rate, which is if it shows the thumbnail and title to 100 people, how many people click on it, and the view duration, what percentage of the video do people watch. And so podcasts are really interesting because people will put them on and listen to them in the background, right, which can give your videos, if it's an interesting conversation, a really long view duration, which then kicks it up in the YouTube algorithm.
It's a whole new definition of view, isn't it?
It is. There's so many different metrics. It's wild.
So Rockstars, as I explained, I mean, Colt's got a fantastic YouTube channel as well.
Thank you.
When you were on the podcast, I think you had already started. I can't remember if we just did the one interview or did we
just
do
the
two?
one?
We just did the one, yeah. But for some reason, I was under the impression that was an introduction initially just on making music and making records.
It was.
And then you started a YouTube channel. And then I was like, look at this kid go, and it took off, man, because you really seem to understand a lot about how to put something like that together, but also whatever you were great at in making music and audio sound great in a recording or production, like you seem to get it quickly when it came to video, which is, I mean, I'm just going to say this, my show, but it's a bit of a mind fuck trying to figure out video stuff.
It's a lot. It's a lot.
All these settings and cameras and stuff like that.
The one thing that I really didn't expect is that, like most of us who make music for a living, I started off producing my own band. I was in a band. I was going to be the rock star, the whole 9 yards. And once you move away from that and you start producing for everyone else, most of us don't create for ourselves very often anymore. Even if I'm writing half the music on everyone else's song, it's not my song.
Yeah.
And so I didn't realize that there was a little bit of a creative void left in my life from that. And for whatever reason, the video thing just filled that void perfectly because it's technical, the lighting, the cameras, the editing, there's a lot of technical stuff to it. It's also performative. I mean, we're sitting here in some way performing for the people watching.
Especially you, man.
And it's very creative. You have to come up with the concepts. You have to bullet point stuff out. You have to, what shots are going to, I just didn't expect it to fill that creative hole so perfectly. And I absolutely love making videos.
Yeah.
I have as much fun doing that as I do making music.
That's sort of what I found too when I started dabbling in the video world. So, I mean, originally it would have just been like learning how to record an iPhone video, which technically there is one right now. We got the room cam going.
There you go.
What's up, room cam? Which is cool because then, and I just added that. Now that means you got like this wide shot of the podcast studio. You can kind of see what's here. You can see the stuff we're using and everything like that. So, Rockstars, if you've got questions about what we're using, feel free to just drop a comment in.
There you go.
But also, as I turn to the room camera, you can probably see I look like Rocky Balboa because I woke up with like some kind of irritation in my eye this morning. And that's like, great. I was joking with you too. That's a funny thing about video. You like, if you wake up and you've got like crazy bedhead, are you like, do you cancel the interview now? Because on podcasts, you just went ahead.
You just roll through it. No, there has been times where, well, right now is a perfect example. I'm doing the No Shave November thing which is just.
Oh, right. Are you usually clean on the sides?
I'm totally clean, yeah. And I was like, let's just try No Shave November. And then as soon as like day number 3, I was like, I need to film a video, and I'm already super, let's just roll with it.
Oh, you're going to end up like me. Do you remember what I used to look like?
Yeah.
With the crazy beard and long hair and everything.
That's a good look. This is a great look too, though.
Well, thank you, man. I'm just trying to get younger as I go. Other than look like I got punched in the face. So what was I going to say? Oh yeah, when I started the podcast, it was like funny because I was like, oh, I don't want to sit in a chair. I'm going to do a standing desk all the time.
I think you were standing when I was on last.
Right.
Yeah.
But before, even when it was remote, I'm not even going to wear a shirt. I'm just going to, and I put extra headphone extensions on and I'd pace around the room. I'd like walk far away from the mic and like come back to it. Cause I could it's almost like being on pacing and thinking and talking.
Totally.
And then when you do video, you're like stuck in a chair, and
you can't even move.
Yeah. But this is a comfortable chair, man.
These are great chairs. Yeah.
Have you sat in one of those before?
What's the brand of this?
This is the Stealth chair.
Yes. I have a different version of this chair at my place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
These are really comfy.
They're great.
Do you care to give a pivot?
Oh, sure.
Turn around. I don't know if you can see that on
Would you all like to see my backside?
Rock stars, yes. Check out our backsides. Yeah, but these are comfy. They got like the whole mesh on them, so like I can actually sit.
Yeah, I feel like they hold you in a good posture.
Yeah, and then it's nice to have armrests again. I didn't have armrests for a while, so.
I'm a sucker for the armrests, and I always want the armrests at the level where there's no tension in my shoulders.
Yeah.
I got, and I had no idea this is where it came from. I started having some crazy back pain. This is 5-6 years ago, and I was like, what's going on? And my wife was like, maybe you should get a new studio chair. And I was like, why? What's wrong with it? Well, I didn't think about, I used to sit with this foot under this leg, and it had bent the chair over years of using it. God. And so I was sitting at an angle for years and not even really thinking about it. And I was starting to get crazy back pain, and I went and got a new chair and had the armrest so that way there's no tension on my shoulders, and it was gone in like 3 days, and I had been living with it for months.
That's amazing. I went through so many variations that I think I actually invented back pain, so you may have just not gotten the delivery for a while.
You got the patent on it?
Yeah, I had the patent on it. I used to go do, I'd call it like setting up guerrilla studios for artists that I'd be producing and working with, and it's like, okay, we're setting up in their parents' basement and like, we've got this extra room over here and there's a funky chair and a couch. One time I went to make a record with this band and they were living in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, right above Brooklyn. And they had an apartment that they rented and there was a hole through the floor that went down into this sub room that was like, it was like being John Malkovich, room floor 3.5. So it was only like, you couldn't actually stand up in it. And they're like, yeah, that's an extra space. So we can set up down there and you can do all the edits down there. And that's your where you sleep too.
Oh, wow.
So I was sleeping in this room where it was like not tall enough to stand upright. So like, yeah, I put up with a lot of ridiculous setups.
Do I recall some story about you doing a record like in a tent or bales of hay or something like that?
Yeah, that was my hay bale studio, 15 years at Bonnaroo.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So it was the backstage studio, and we'd take a double wide trailer and fill it full of recording studio equipment and then bring in local farmer bales of hay and set it up and build a whole like hay castle around the trailer. So it looked like a giant bale of hay with 2 doors coming out and steps going up to the doors. And a band would show up at one door and they'd walk in. I'd welcome them. I'd like come out of this bale of hay with a straw hat on or something. And be like, hey, who's this? It'd be some kind of some famous artist too.
Yeah.
I'd be like, hey, what do you guys got? Okay, cool. Why don't you set up like this? And we'd sound check them and record them in an hour, 10 minutes, 5 minutes to sound check really, really fast.
Yeah.
Record 3 songs, master it. And then they'd walk to the other end of the trailer and there'd be a little radio interview booth. And while we were cleaning up and getting ready for the next band, they're doing a radio interview. And so they'd walk out the other door and down the other steps,
that's cool.
Like a little amusement ride,
That's very, very cool. That's awesome.
But to your point, I put up with a lot of totally wrong setups, and it was killing my back. I remember one of the first pieces of gear that I bought, like you, was a chair, and I got one of those Aaron Miller chairs.
Yeah.
When I was in an apartment in Chicago, and it like completely changed. Not everything, but a lot of the neck problems.
Yeah, that I remember the first time I heard, this is so not audio related. Sorry. I remember.
Well, it is. This is all audio
I guess
related.
it kind of is.
100% chairs and like not getting hurt while you're editing and mixing.
The first time I went into a mattress store, which, let's be honest, mattress stores are probably money laundering operations, right? Like nobody's ever there, and they're everywhere. But I digress.
It'd be better if the money was in the mattress.
It would be. I remember this mattress salesman. I was like, I don't know, that's a lot of money for a mattress, and he's like, you spend a third of your life in bed, right? And I was like, oof. They taught you that in mattress salesman school, didn't they?
I know that exact story
that's,
too.
That's a hard one to refute. You spend a third of your life in bed.
Yeah, so I spent a lot of money on a mattress once, and it was for that very same thinking. I was like, oh wait, if you spend that much time there, why'd you spend your money on somewhere else? So
yes,
I do think, for whatever it's worth, I mean, this is a long discussion about chairs, but to get a good chair, if you're going to sit in the studio for that long, make it comfortable. I will say I used to have my vintage console, and the meter bridge was a little high, so therefore the screen behind it went up a little higher so I could see over it. And it was just a little bit of hunch and creak, and it was killing my neck and back.
Yep.
So I definitely encourage you rock stars to seriously consider.
Yeah.
The ergonomics should be like, you got to sit first and decide like, what's the most absolutely effortless, comfortable position I can do? Okay, the whole rest of this control room gets built around that.
Exactly, 100%. No, I think that's super important. And also, I mean, this gets a little philosophical, but if you're thinking about your setup, if you're thinking about being uncomfortable, if you're thinking about, this hurts to reach over here, you're going to be less creative. Right. And like, it can really take you out of like a creative flow. Like when I'm mixing, I will settle into a zone. And like sometimes once I hit that groove, it's like I don't get up to go to the bathroom or get a drink or take a break or nothing until I feel like I've accomplished my goal, or I fall out of that zone for whatever reason, or we hit the finish line, whatever happens first.
Yeah.
Because I'm a big believer in once you fall into a creative flow state, that's where the magic happens.
Yeah.
Like the everything that you can do to eliminate your environment taking you out of that state, I think.
Do you ever do the Pomodoro technique for
I don't know what that is.
Studio mixing? So there's this sort of shows up in the entrepreneurial, like world as far as like sitting down and getting work done. And the Pomodoro is, imagine the old kitchen timers. It looks like a tomato, Pomodoro tomato. Yep. And you turn it up and it hit 20 minutes was like the time. And so the technique essentially says like, have a timer that you can use where you set a predetermined amount of time. And when you start the timer, everything's off. You're only working. And when it rings, you actually have to stop working. You get up and take your pre-prescribed break. So it's like doing what you described, but instead of like trying to stay focused until you just can't stand it anymore. Yeah. Then you which could be too long. It depends.
Absolutely,
and each individual is a little different.
Of course.
Some people have got different thresholds, but like by getting up out of the chair for 5 minutes, 10 minutes and taking the break and moving about, it's, good for our health and all that kind of stuff.
I have over the last year or so been wearing an Apple Watch to try to be healthier and try to keep a track on my heart rate and all that kind of stuff. And it will, if I have it turned on, it will give me notifications of like, hey, it's time to stand up. And honestly, it definitely gamifies the health thing in terms of like, oh, you got these little exercise rings. You want to close this ring. And if you stand up for 5 minutes every hour, and you do that every hour that you're awake, it closes this ring, and it like kind of gamifies trying to be healthy. Yeah. Yeah. It's nice.
Yeah. So that's interesting. For some reason, when you said Apple Watch too, I pictured like just a stupid joke, like somebody with an apple just strung to their wrist too. That's right. I don't have an Apple Watch, but I do eat a lot of apples, man.
Apples are great.
I ate them nonstop. I just had 3 for lunch.
That's a good lunch.
That's pretty good. So speaking of which, health is, an important thing for all of us in the studio too. Yeah. I know this may be like jumping straight to a topic like that.
No, that's fine.
But do you have any more stuff that you've seen about balance, studio life balance, and keeping your health up?
Yeah.
And we get to do this for a long time.
Over the past couple of years, lots of people have been asking me for a health update anyway, so this is a good opportunity. Over the past few years, I've had some pretty crazy blood pressure issues where I almost had a couple strokes.
Oh man.
And eventually they like maxed me out on some blood pressure meds, and it was just like, okay, this is it. This is as good as we can go. So if I want to get better, it's got to be on me. And so I kind of have changed up everything. I've eaten, my diet's totally different. I cut out all caffeine. I cut out all alcohol. I go to the gym 4 days a week, and like things are in a really, really good spot now.
Are you a lifter?
Yeah, I mean, it's mostly cardio. I do like at least 30 minutes of cardio 4 times a week, because I'm just trying to, whatever's going on with my heart and my veins and all that stuff, I'm just trying to get that back into shape.
And you just listen to my podcast?
I do. Only this podcast.
Thanks,
yes. Yeah.
Thanks.
I wish you put out more episodes, because 4 days a week I run out. But it's an interesting thing trying to balance that. And I think for one, it's so difficult to get off the ground making a living at making music to begin with, that like if you're not pouring every waking moment into it, you may not make it. Like it's very hard to get off the ground. And it just I think that I was really terrible at like the exercise. I was really terrible at taking time off for a long time. And now for me, it's mandatory. Like having a kid helps a ton. I drop my daughter off at school at 7:15, 7:20, and then it's like either straight to the gym or straight to work.
Yeah.
And then she gets home at like, she goes into aftercare, and then she gets home at 4 or 4:30, and so that's when my day stops every day. And so that kind of forces you to slow down. Before we had her, it was just 16 hours a day, every single day.
Yeah.
7 days a week, you just hustling, trying to make the thing work. So that's a hard one. I don't really know if I had to start over in my career right now. I don't know how I would handle it. It's almost like, I almost feel like I had to sacrifice my younger years to become successful in music. So that way I could have the luxury of slowing down and taking the time.
There's something to be said for putting in the hard work ahead of time or now,
early,
for a bit of a reward later, for sure.
Yeah, I'm 41 now, and I know that's not old. I'm like just entering my peak years in the music industry, but I don't know if I could do it again.
At iZotope, mixing just got even smarter. Introducing the new iZotope Catalyst series, Plasma, Aurora, and Cascadia, designed to transform your sound with intelligent processing for dynamically precise saturation, reverb, and delay. Plus, Neutron now features 3 new modules and an upgraded AI-powered mix assistant to help you get killer mixes with ease. Use the secret code ROCK10 to get 10% off the Catalyst series, Neutron, RX, or any of iZotope's incredible plugins at iZotope.com. Well, I think it's one of the reasons why it's good to do kind of the crazy moves when you're young. We talked about this on the show recently, just the value of youthful ignorance.
Oh,
like if you knew enough, you maybe wouldn't do the things that you need to do. But when you kind of have a little bit of, precious cluelessness when you're younger, then you go crazy on I'm not going to work. I don't want to work. I mean, I do work a lot now.
Yeah.
But when I get excited about certain aspects of it,
of course.
But back then it was like work 7 days a week.
Yeah.
The only break was dinner, and that was just like
100%.
And it was already like, that was too long. We need to get back to work.
We need to go. Yeah, I feel like I have historically had this problem, and it didn't come from a cocky place, but I have always thought, well, if something needs to be done, so I can hire somebody to do that, and they're not any smarter than I am. So I'm just going to do everything. And that has followed through from construction projects to working on cars to, literally everything. And that is some of that youthful ignorance that I think was necessary. I wouldn't have got here if I didn't have some of that youthful ignorance and tore a whole 4-bedroom house down to the studs and learned how to remodel everything.
Wow, I haven't done a full house remodel.
I'll never do it again.
Yeah,
but
I've done bits and pieces of various things like that. And I think, on a certain level, it's good to, kind of overdo it at first because then you learn how everything works. So like for me right now, overdoing it is launching the video podcast where I'm like, okay, I'm going to learn, I'm going to test it 50 times and learn the cameras and the lighting and try a bunch of stuff and learn the app that I'm using. Riverside is this app we're using right now to record everything. And I'm also like trying to speed learn Reaper because I think I may be editing video and podcasts in Reaper.
Got it.
Because Reaper will do audio and video tracks. Now, I've been saying it a lot on the show, Rockstars, so it's possible that by the time this comes out, I'll be like, oh yeah, I bailed on that already. But in the moment,
Yeah.
Because these will come out later. But but like, deep diving and all that stuff with the idea that before I'm ready to ask for help on it too, I think I might want to know how it works so I know what I'm asking for.
Yeah, 100%. I'm kind of back and forth on that right now. Is like, do I hire somebody? Do I not hire somebody? Like I've heard people say like, you don't need to hire more people. You need to do less stuff. And like, I'm like, oh, that's an interesting point of view, but then there's a limit to how much you can do.
Right.
But then as soon as you start hiring people, everything turns into a machine that like now you're responsible for people's payroll and like, pros and cons to both.
So let's back up a little bit. So this whole idea of like, I suggested you start out with what's your comfort zone and you build the studio around you. You just built another studio, didn't you?
Yes. Well, heavily modified my existing room, but yes.
Yeah. So I can't remember that you had started this when we did our last interview, but you dove into Atmos.
I think that, no, I definitely wasn't doing Atmos. I think my current house was under construction the last time I was here with you.
It was like 5 years ago.
Yeah, like 5 years ago. Yeah. No, the Atmos thing is, it has been such a wild journey, and the building of the room has been an insane journey because I did it all myself and filmed it all myself. The videos are up on the channel.
Talk about 10xing the workload.
Oh, man.
To talk about that a little bit, like the challenge of like, you're trying to do a thing, which is difficult. Like, any of us who are listening to this right now, we're thinking about like, I just want to make a great song and then produce it and record it.
Sure.
So like, imagine the difficulty of doing that and then thinking, okay, I'm simultaneously going to capture every moment on video and tell the whole story and
tell
make
the whole
that
story.
Its own thing.
And be conscious. Yeah. Well, so for those who haven't seen the video, Gavin Haverstick designed my room. And I did everything myself. I'm apparently a glutton for punishment because it was 9 months of hell. It took so much longer than I thought it was going to take, which is every construction project I've ever done.
Right.
However, when I started this, the YouTube channel has been a serious thing for long enough now that I kind of look at everything I'm going to do through the lens of how is it going to be a video.
Yeah. There's
like two separate parts of my life. There's the music that I work on for my clients, the music I make, 100 plus songs a year get released. And that's my career. And then like the YouTube channel I look at as my hobby, even though I guess it's not really a hobby anymore.
It can absolutely be a career.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I'm always looking at everything through the lens of how do I turn this into an enticing video that will help someone watching it.
Yeah.
We can go on about this forever. So my first session on Pro Tools, this is how far back this goes. My first session on Pro Tools, I became a partner in this recording studio. I never worked in a DAW before. I'd only worked on little hard disk recorders. I get a band.
You mean like the mini disc recorders? Or no, like the HD24 kind of thing?
Like, what was it? Like a Korg. I had a little Korg.
Roland 1608.
Yeah, that sort of stuff. Yeah. Yep. And I got this band, convinced this band to let me produce them. I'm just working in the studio for the first time. I didn't know what a patch bay was. I didn't know how to use Pro Tools. Like, I'm just clueless. And the band is loading in, and the engineer that works there, he's like, all right, well, F12's how you hit record. See ya. And walks out the door. And I'm like, oh, dear God.
He's like, here, and so FU is how you hit record.
Yeah, exactly. And so I only say that to say that's the level of mentorship that I had. That's the most mentorship I've ever had in my career.
So you know what it's like to not know how to
have any idea how to do anything. And I feel like my trajectory in my music career took significantly longer than it needed to because I didn't have any mentors. So when I first started the YouTube channel, my thought process was, how do I be the mentor that I wish that I would have had? And like, if someone goes and watches all 300 videos or whatever that's up there, you probably know everything you need to know to be a successful engineer or mixer or whatever you're trying to do. So that is kind of, I'm always looking at everything that I do, every change that I make to the studio, every piece of gear that I get, every whatever, and like through the lens of like, how do I position this in a way that will help someone watching it, either make a helpful purchase decision or help them with new mixing techniques or whatever. So then when it came time to redo the studio, when we were putting Atmos in, and there was some serious low-end issues in the room. And it was like, Atmos is such an intense installation process, and it's so much money that if I'm going to fix this room, it has to happen now. Like, I have to fix this before Atmos goes in. I'm never going to tear this Atmos rig back out. So I got in touch with Gavin Haverstick, and he designed the room. And then from there, it just became, I knew everything was going to be filmed. And I had filmed the building of the room originally, and it is hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of views. I think it'll hit 1 million here pretty soon.
That's amazing.
And that was the second video on the channel that kind of did anything. And so I was like, oh, this is a thing. And if I would have known that this was going to be a thing, I would have done a bunch of stuff different in that video. So here's my opportunity to make this video absolutely incredible.
Now, talk a little bit about how you iterate if you're making something like a video like that. Do you just look at it and you're like, I screwed that up, I can just tell that it needs to do this? Do you go study analytics and metrics? Do you read comments and people just tell you?
Yes, all of it. Yeah. At this point, you go hundreds of videos in. At this point, I kind of can bullet point a whole video out in my head and know exactly what I need to do. And I'm very interested in psychology, like how to hold people's attention.
Yeah.
And this actually started in music, because I don't know what they are now, but if you looked up the Spotify skip rates from like 2018, it was like 25% of people skipped in the first 5 seconds, and like 35% of people skipped the song in the first 10 seconds, and like 45% skipped in the first minute. And so for 6 or 7 years now, I've been focused on like, how do we hold people's attention? But that was always in music, and now it's just the exact same thing on video.
Maybe all those people were just people with home studios like me, who I'm always like flipping through. I'm like, what does that sound like? Ooh, that's what that sounds like. What does the next one sound like? Ooh, that sounds like that.
Totally. Yeah. So
it's like sonic snapshots. 100%. I'm terrible about it.
But I'm fascinated with the psychology of how to grab people and how to hold their attention. And so now that you just do that 300 times on video, and you start learning like what keeps people and what doesn't, what titles
and that's thumbnails. Where a metric comes in, where you can actually see like, oh, people are watching and then they stop watching here.
100%. Yeah, you can see
stuff like that.
You can see a click-through rate. So like I know exactly if I post a video and 100 people are shown the title and thumbnail, what percentage of those people click on it. And the higher that number is, the more views the more successful the video is going to ultimately be. But then you also, like we were talking about before, then you also have to keep their attention for a big percentage of the video. So then that comes into like, how do you talk? How do you present? How do you lead someone with questions? And like, here's a question that I had, I'm going to answer this question. So on that video, the question was, is it worth it to go all in on acoustic treatment, to hire a professional studio designer, to spend what ended up being 9 or 10 months of my life doing this?
Yeah.
Is that end result worth all of that effort? And then the video is just documenting how incredibly difficult it was to build this whole thing.
Yeah.
Especially when you're not really a carpenter, And
you maybe had an unusual space too, isn't it? It's sort of in the apex of a house.
It's a bonus room above a garage. We built the house around the studio. So even though it's above a garage, there's big beams in the ceiling of the garage, and the floor is like 5 layers thick of different materials.
Right, so it's a sturdy studio.
Yeah, it's very purpose built, but it is a second floor bonus
room. Did you consider
room.
building the whole thing on a piece of plywood? Be a lot cheaper.
You know, it was funny. We sent, when we decided on this layout for the house, and I told the builders what I wanted to do for the floor. First of all, they thought I was crazy because they were just house builders. They don't build studios.
Yeah.
And so then they ran the numbers and they said, well, just the floor alone that you want is 6,000 additional pounds. So now we got to get into structural side and figure out what beams we got to. It was like a whole thing. But anyway, so in terms of how to film something like a studio rebuild like that, it really was just about what angles are going to look aesthetically pleasing.
Right.
It's a lot of time lapse
really
stuff.
Tricky. Even like in this little studio, just like where do you put? It took me a bunch of tries just to figure out where does the camera go and where do I go and where does the guest go. Seems 100%. Like such a simple thing to do.
No, 100%. It's infinitely variable. There's just, you could change it forever. And then you get into the color grading and how zoomed in are you? So like there's certain things that I'm doing in the construction process where I want a super tight close-up of how I'm tucking the fabric.
Yeah.
Or I want a super wide, long time lapse of me building the soffit or like.
Well, that didn't slow down the build process at all for you.
No, it probably doubled it, honestly. It probably took twice as long.
Yeah.
And then when I got to the end, I had been filming for 9 months. I had hundreds of hours of footage, hundreds of hours to sift through.
Yeah.
And so then I'm like, how do I even process this into a video and especially a video that's going to hold people's attention through this whole thing?
Yeah.
So I turned.
And some of it's got talking on it.
Yep.
But not all of it, right?
But not all of it. No, just only when I'm explaining something or when there's a shift or when I was struggling with motivation or like whatever. And so I just started batch processing stuff. Like the file names on the video clips are in numerical order. Mm-hmm. So I just started dragging them in order into the timeline, and then everything.
Now the file naming. Did you know that before you started this thing?
Yeah.
So what is something like that? How do you not end up with just a mess of bits and pieces?
On my camera, I run I don't know how. I'm happy to go into this however far you want. I run a Sony A7 IV. And so the file names for each video clip are in numerical order from when I bought the camera. So I'm up to, I don't know,
I see. Okay.
8,000 something video clips that I've shot on that camera. So at the start of that video, I'm at whatever, clip 4,037. And then at the end of it, it's clip 7,091 or whatever.
Yeah.
And so I just drag them in order into the timeline. And then every clip that I wasn't talking in, I just sped it up by like 2,000%.
Right.
And that was like, okay, this is the starting point.
The speed up.
Yeah.
And then you're like, well, wait a minute, hold on, that's way too fast.
Then some of it's way too fast.
Yeah.
So that was like the base point. And once I drug all those into the timeline and sped them all up, the video was like 4 hours long.
Amazing. And then you're like, well, that's way too long.
That can't happen. Yeah. Nobody's going to watch a 4-hour video. So I cut everything.
Well, did you call Peter Jackson? He might have been like, if he just put his name on it, maybe people would watch it.
Right? I cut everything out of that video I could justify. If I cut another second out of it, the story wouldn't have made sense.
Right.
And it ended up being an hour and 20 minutes long, which is like a feature-length documentary, pretty much, you know.
Amazing.
Yeah, it was quite the process.
What a process. But then it ended up doing well.
So the video did extremely well. It's
now,
still
when
growing.
It comes to something like that, what if it, I guess, I mean, again, maybe we're going too far in the weeds, but it seems like such a big thing of work to do. Mm-hmm. And then you put it out and then you're like, I hope I did it right where it does well. Whereas I know that there are some things you can change your mind on later. Like you can change a thumbnail picture. Yep. And it's rock stars. If you don't do this stuff, maybe you don't know what the hell the thumbnail is, but it's just the picture you see.
If you don't do this stuff and you create music in any sort of professional capacity, you should be paying attention to YouTube and how to make videos and how to edit them and how to title and thumbnail, in addition to creating content on Instagram and TikTok, because it's so incredibly powerful for promoting what you do.
Yeah.
I mean, the YouTube channel gets 500,000 views a month. And like, you couldn't possibly pay to put yourself in front of that many people every month. It would cost $10,000 a month to promote something like that.
Yeah.
So
it's always a funny conundrum too, like, or a funny balance of when I started the podcast and then I did this. Mm-hmm. and I had the studio going, which I still make records with clients like you do, people would always ask me like, oh, did you start the podcast so you could get more clients? And I'm like, no. I actually think no. I was like, no, I just wanted it to be its own business, and another thing. And I mean, a great deal of it is hobby until you figure that stuff out.
Of course.
But it's doing what we love doing.
Yes.
But it just always seemed a little funny to me. It's like, it'd be like, imagine going in other careers where like you go and get a job as a doctor, but you then go get like you start up a whole nother business as a hospital just so that you can give yourself work as the doctor. I don't know. Maybe that's
no. It's funny to hear you say that, because I assumed that the channel would get me a ton of work, more work than I could possibly handle as it started taking off. And I didn't do it for that reason, but that's kind of what I assumed would happen.
Yeah.
And as it started taking off, I realized that no, the people that watch it are people that do exactly what I do. They're not the people that hire me. They're the people that want to be where I am.
Right. So you didn't necessarily know that at the start.
No, not at all.
That's awesome.
No, in the very, very start of the channel was I put a lot of effort, which we probably talked about on the last episode. I put a lot of effort into growing my Instagram once we got here. Mm-hmm. And it was really just about like, I needed every artist in this town to know who I was. And if 10,000 people know who I am and what I do, the percentage of those that decide to hire me will be enough to pay my bills. Like, that was my thought process. And where was I going with
Well, and
this?
especially in Nashville. So Rockstars Nashville, of course, is a place where it's a very vibrant professional music scene and community. So there's a real attitude of like, okay, if you need to get going, you need to network like crazy and meet people, and people need to know who you are, and all the incoming songwriters and artists and bands need to know who you are as a producer so that you can then have the work and everything. So that kind of thinking,
which I think
really
you should do
here.
that. I think you should do that in every city. If you live in Boise, Idaho, and you have a studio, every band and artist in Boise, Idaho should know who you are and that you have a studio, and a percentage of them are going to hire you. And like that, I think that's just a good strategy no matter where you are. But so I spent a lot of time growing the Instagram back then, and I would get these same like 10 questions from artists constantly in terms of like, how do I get a manager? How much should I charge for shows? How do I choose a producer? How, just the exact same questions. And I was getting them often enough that I started feeling bad that I couldn't dedicate the time to answering these questions for these artists as much as I wanted to. And so I thought, well, what if I just start doing podcast episodes? And I threw my iPhone up, and I had an SM7 going into Pro Tools, and all those videos are still up on the channel. The earliest videos on the channel, a lot of them are
just iPhone and SM7.
iPhone SM7 and 45 minutes of everything I think about how to get a manager.
What do you like about an SM7 too?
The rejection. I like that if I get this far away from an SM7, you can't hear it.
Okay, cool. All right, that's good to know. Right. And also, I think they're designed to sound good when you eat the mic. So that it's like when I've gone to a radio station, they're like, just eat the mic.
Yeah, put your lips on it.
You just so therefore nobody's wondering how far should I be on the mic and stuff like that.
But so I filmed those episodes, so that way when an artist would ask me those questions, I could reply with a link. Here's everything that I think about this particular topic, and it was just a metric to help artists. And then in doing that, the time code on the iPhones back then, the audio and the video would be 3 or 4 seconds off from each other at the end of a 45-minute clip.
Oh, right, because you're recording in one place and filming on another.
Exactly.
Yeah, boy, that stuff would drive me bananas. I'd do like a multicam capture of something in the studio to try and make a video.
Yep.
And then you're like, why the hell doesn't this line up?
So I started like having to cut seconds out of it to make it line up throughout the episode. And I've always been interested in photography, but only to the extent of like, I just always bought the newest iPhone to have the best camera, and I'm like, well, if I'm going to keep doing this, I'm going to buy a real camera. So then I didn't even know what YouTube was really. Like, YouTube to me was if I needed to put a new faucet in my sink, I could just YouTube how to do that real quick. Or like some people, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I remember early learning about value of YouTube, and it was like, what do you mean you can go watch a woodworking how-to tutorial?
Exactly. So in my mind, that's what YouTube was. And like I knew Logan Paul existed. I knew there were YouTubers, but I didn't really even know what that meant. I didn't watch any YouTube. And so in the search for what camera I should buy, I started finding these YouTubers like Casey Neistat and Peter McKinnon and like and I was like, oh my God, this is like the coolest thing I've ever seen. And like 100 million other people that started YouTube channels, I was like, what if I just did Peter McKinnon in a recording studio? And so I just ripped off everything that he did for the first bunch of videos.
I remember learning about him too.
Yep. And
he was sort of like very filmmaker oriented, right?
Yeah. But he's where I learned about lighting. You were asking me about that earlier. Like, how did I learn like what to do with lighting? It was all from Peter and Maddie Hapoya on YouTube.
Dreaming of a career in audio or the entertainment business? SAE Institute Nashville, in the heart of Music Row, offers hands-on programs where you'll learn on professional-grade gear with industry pros, learning through real projects, not just lectures. Explore studio production, live sound, audio for film, and a whole lot more. Or take the entertainment business program to learn about contracts, promotion, and more. With diploma, associate, and bachelor's programs, there's a path for you. Book a tour today at nashville.sae.edu or call 615-244-5848. Well, you know, it's funny because I spend a lot of time. YouTube, I'd watch it a lot.
Yeah. Now it's the only thing I watch.
And there's a part of me that like is if I want to relax and I want to turn something on, I'm like, I might go for a movie or TV show, and then I'm like, I'm already bored trying to find one to start. And then there's the other part's like, all right, I really just want to watch something for the next 5-10 minutes or something. Go back to whatever I'm interested in doing, like building my video studio. And then YouTube is like the place to go for that.
Yeah, unless me and the wife are watching a show together, I only consume YouTube now. I don't even watch TV shows.
Well, you kind of have to do your research now too.
Yeah, but funny enough, I watch zero audio related content on YouTube. I listen to podcasts, listen to your podcast.
Thank you very much.
I listen to some audio podcasts or have throughout the years, but and this is nothing against any of the music studio related YouTube channels. I make music all day, every day, and then I make videos about making music the rest of the time.
Yeah.
And so it's not, my YouTube feed is like sports cars or watches or like just a bunch of different random interests that I'm into, you know. I've been obsessed with blacksmithing lately, like watching these guys.
Right on. We got like, the black hat, and the black shirt there.
Watching these guys forge together metals that you shouldn't be forged together. And like, it's just, yeah, I could talk about
have
that
you
forever.
ever done this where you are making your own videos and then you watch other channels that are in totally different genres and you start thinking like, oh, you're like start noticing they do it very different and you're like, oh, I should do that. And then you're not sure if, and then like maybe that's a good choice.
Yeah.
To borrow and bring over this other style of doing things, or maybe it's completely the wrong fit.
For me, I get inspiration from the concepts. If someone makes a particular video about this camera model or a particular video about this knife that they made or a particular video about this sports car and how it drives, I oftentimes will be like, that's a great way to present an idea, and I can do that same thing for this compressor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so examples for me would be watching daily stream kind of content. So like I've always been fascinated by, you know, cryptocurrencies and things like that. And so those are channels where people would make something every day. Just this is an update.
Yes.
It's like something happened today, so therefore you can do an update.
Yep.
So I always thought like, gosh, it would be so cool to do that in audio. And then I'm like, how would you find out what happened today in audio? You know,
100%.
You know, it's not quite built the same.
No.
But there's elements of that. And then there was another guy who did a thing where he had the cleverest way. He would film on his iPhone all his videos, but he would do a screen share instead of actually pressing record on the video so that he could flip to selfie, flip it around and point at whatever he wanted to. And then he'd just like swipe and flip over to the other app to show the chart or the latest bit of whatever he wanted to show.
That's
neat. I was like, what a clever way to just do it all in one shot and not have to do any editing.
That's very clever. Yeah.
So you just see all these different techniques.
There's so many different techniques and so many, it's also been really interesting to watch the style of what works on YouTube evolve over the years. And like, we keep going back and forth between everything needs to be these tiny bite-sized videos, and now people like really long-form stuff, and then now maybe they want 15-minute videos, and then now they want hour-long videos.
So we become like fashion.
It's literally like fashion, except it moves way faster than fashion ever could.
You can't even get your last outfit off before you got to put the new outfit on.
No, it changes constantly, and so does music. So does releasing music and the algorithms on playlists and Spotify and Apple Music. And so personally, I've just kind of settled, and what I always tell my artists to do, I've just kind of settled on, can we swear on this podcast?
I've already sworn like 3 or 4 times.
Fuck
man.
yeah. Just do good shit. Just make good videos, make good music, just do good shit.
Yeah.
And if you just do that over and over and over, and you are even slightly good at promoting it or getting it in front of people, it'll work. Just good shit resonates with people.
Yeah. Well, I mean, doing an audio podcast now for 10 years, it's keeps growing, and it's been wonderful to see. And by the time this episode's out, we've already crossed 3 million downloads.
Oh, that's awesome.
It's like 500. I think this morning was my 500th episode interview.
Wow.
So this will be 501, I think, unless I screw up how these are lined up later, which is always possible. And so it's fun to like see all that and connect with people.
Yes.
And maybe you see this in making videos, like doing my podcast, where I'll run into somebody and they're like, "Oh man, I love it. I listen to it all the time." And I've listened to every one, or I've just caught up.
Yes.
Caught up. When I discovered podcasts, I listened to this guy named Pat Flynn.
Okay.
And I remember discovering, I was like, this is killer. I want to learn all about this. And I went all the way back to the beginning of the first one we ever did. And I listened through every single episode.
Yep.
And it was like 70 at the time.
Yeah.
But I'm like, when I meet somebody and they're telling me they've listened to 500 episodes of this podcast, that's over 1,000 hours.
That's wild. That's so wild.
Of audio recording.
Yeah.
Like, that's intense. So
it's interesting to watch. It's interesting to see people's, you probably experienced it when we were at NAMM. It's almost 2 years ago we saw each other at NAMM already.
I think it might have been, Audioscape booth.
Yeah, Audioscape booth. The quantity of people that came up and were like, I'm full-time in music because of your videos. And that's I'm just amazing. Like, oh, it almost brought me to tears a couple times, because it's like you do all this stuff. You make this podcast. You put all this time into these lights and these cameras and all this stuff. And then you just put it out into the ether. And you get some comments and you get some feedback, and sometimes those are good and sometimes those aren't good. But you never get the person looking you in the eye right in front of you saying you've made my life better. Like that's intense.
Well, you have an advantage. So if you go to an event and somebody spots you a little ways over, they recognize your face
for sure
from video.
Yes.
As a podcaster, as an audio podcaster, nobody's necessarily going to recognize me. But I've been on an escalator at NAMM where I was talking to somebody I was with, and the person in front of me turns around. He's like, "Dude, I love your podcast."
That's awesome. You have a distinct voice.
I was like, "Wow, man."
Yeah. No, that's awesome. That is so awesome.
That helps. So one of the things that I wanted to bring up too was unexpected for me, which maybe you would find too. And in a lot of, you've filmed the building of your studio. I believe you went to Sweetwater and saw Atmos for the first time and came back and with Mind Blown with the exploded brain.
Oh, it was
dragging along behind you, and then built yours.
It broke me. Yeah.
But it's like this idea of going into creating this stuff, just like when you started yours, you start out making an audio podcast or a video podcast thinking you're going to share what you already know. You know what? It's like being an intern. You walk into a studio and you think, I really want them to know how much I know. And then what happens is all you do is learn.
All the time.
So I've learned so much from all these interviews and from all the people I've had on the show.
I kind of want to start doing some interviews on my channel for that very reason. It hit me the other day. Someone told me, we were talking about Serban, the mixer.
Yeah.
How do you say his last name?
Serban. Yeah, I think it's Serban. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
We just, one of the companies I work with is Make Believe Audio that put out my MBSI plugin, which I don't know if I've gotten you a copy.
I haven't.
Or if you've heard
I'd love to check it out.
Yeah.
I would love to.
I'd love for you to hear it.
Yeah.
But another plugin they do is called Mixhead, and
Oh yeah, I have heard of that one.
yeah, and Serban's preset on there is like the one to use. I think it's literally called the one.
Well, I think Serban might be the most successful mix engineer in history in terms of working on the quantity of super big hits. And I don't even remember who I was talking to the other day, and I was like, man, I'd love to have a conversation with him because he doesn't really do interviews. Like there's like nothing out there on the guy.
Yeah.
And they were like, well, you should try because you could probably get Serban. And it just hit me all of a sudden. I'm like, I'm in the most unique position to have a YouTube channel that's maybe just popular enough to get to have conversations with my heroes.
Yeah.
Why am I not doing that?
Yeah. Like Rick Beato. I mean, I think
he's crushing it.
Yeah. But when he started, he was posting videos of his son having perfect pitch.
100%.
Now, of course, he came into this whole YouTube world with like a long history of great production.
He's an incredibly talented, knowledgeable person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I remember those first videos coming out that he was making where he's demonstrating, he's teaching.
Yes.
It's kind of the same story we just said.
It is.
He's teaching how to do stuff, how to get a compression on a snare. And then you're like, how the hell did you get that Nirvana track that you're using as the example or whatever it was, you know?
Yeah.
And then more recently, I feel like I see a lot of great interviews.
He's crushing the interviews lately. Yeah. And so he's
very good at it.
He's very good at it. That has kind of just recently struck me. I'm like, I need to start doing that. I'm not trying to do interviews only at all, but like, why would I not take advantage of this and learn from my heroes? And if it gets filmed and it helps other people, awesome. But like selfishly, I want to talk to Chris Lord-Alge and ask him how he got that snare drum on that one Hailstorm record. You know what I mean? Like,
do it. Do it. You probably make it look good in the process.
Oh, maybe. I don't know. We'll see.
So let's see. Talk about learning about Atmos and then setting that up.
Absolutely.
Because I know that's a big deal for you right now.
It is. Well, so like you said, the first time I heard it was in Sweetwater Studio B, and it's probably been over 3 years ago now. And I remember it's an unbelievable room. If you have the opportunity to go to Sweetwater and go listen in Studio B, you can book a listening and like you should do it. It's $150,000 worth of speakers in this 360-degree environment, and it felt like hearing music for the first time.
Yeah.
After at that point 18 years of making records. I was just like, oh, it melted my brain. It broke me. And I remember leaving and being like, how am I supposed to go back to stereo? And I know not everyone has that exact same, that same reaction. But for me, it literally broke me. And I was like, I can't go back now. This is the future. And for a whole bunch of business reasons, which I'm happy to get into, I'm like, this is the future. And so literally went back home, and about 2 months later, my first client ended up, not my very first client, but the first time that this happened to me, a client ended up hiring someone else to mix because they needed an Atmos version. And so then it became, not only am I obsessed with this as a format, but I'm actually losing money now. Mm-hmm. So that was literally the moment that I was like, okay, I have to get an Atmos rig. I don't know what that looks like. I don't know anything about putting it in. I don't know how to tune it. I don't know what gear. I don't know.
Is that when you went to go hear the one at Sweetwater, or had you already heard it?
I had already heard that, yeah. And then shortly after that, Sweetwater hosted this Atmos class with Mike Miller, who unfortunately has passed away since then. He did like Macklemore and Lil Nas X and J-Lo and like just these Harry Styles, just these unbelievable records in Atmos. He just did Atmos stuff.
I remember hearing you talk about that.
And his mixes are just, he passed away a while ago, maybe 8 months ago or something. And his mixes are still just the best thing I've ever heard in Atmos. And so I spent 3 days with him. I did an interview with him. It's up on the channel. And he gave me some insight in that class and like, oh, I need to do X, Y, and Z for the setup. It was really like, I probably need to go 914 for a couple specific reasons. And so then I went home and I just started planning, and everything was on back order because everyone was putting Atmos rigs in. The speakers were on back order. The interfaces were on back order, just everything. And so I just started planning stuff out, and then at the same time planning the remodel of the studio because I need to fix the low end in the room in order to put Atmos in. And then the craziest thing to me is Gavin Haverstick, who designed the room. He designed it for Atmos. I mean, it's an incredible stereo room, but he did the whole design for everything. And he sent me prints of every single thing to do and exact dimensions of where to put every single speaker. And then Josh Istok, who used to work for Focal, he's just recently left. He came in and tuned the room and like lasered everything and helped me install everything. And I don't know how you could get to an end result that we got to without people like that. It blows my mind that Gavin was like, put the speakers here. And then Josh put the speakers there. And then Josh tuned it and did all the delay work and then did the crossovers for the subs and did everything. And with zero corrective EQ, the room was plus or minus 3 dB from like 31 hertz up, which is that's crazy, crazy flat.
Right. Wow.
And then we've just tweaked it again. He just came back over and did the final tweak on it. And now it's plus or minus like 2 dB.
Wow. Wow.
With some tuning.
And the cool thing about that, I mean, that might sound like mumbo jumbo when we hear that, but what that really translates to is it means if you can let the audio come out of the speakers without any more processing or manipulation, it's sort of like the purest. It's like the benchmark for the gold standard for the best sounding audio.
Well, what happens is as you well know, sound comes out the speakers and it hits our ears, and then we make decisions in the mix based on that information that we're being given. But if your room isn't well tuned, or you have crappy speakers, crappy is subjective, so we could dig into that too. But you could be making mix decisions based on bad information. If the room prior to this treatment was plus or minus 16. It was horrible in the low end. And so when I'm mixing the kick drum and the bass guitar and the synthesizer, and I'm trying to get all of this to work together, I'm fighting the room and making mix decisions that are not great because the room is lying to me. I'm not being given accurate information. And so the idea is if you can acoustically treat your room in a great way and have monitors and tuning that flattens all that out, now when I hear a kick drum or a bass guitar or a synthesizer, I can tell everything about it all the way down to 30 hertz. I know exactly what's happening. I know what the transient feels like. I know if how the kick drum was tuned is clashing with the notes that the bass guitar are playing, because I can actually hear all of that now.
That's so awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah, and it made such an enormous difference, but it's not without its challenges. It took, 30 hours to tune the room, to tune the rig, because there's 15 speakers in there.
Right.
You're not just tuning left and right and subwoofers. You're tuning every single speaker. And I'm using 2 different models of speakers. I've got Focal Trio 11s for my left, center, right. And then I've got Focal Solo 6s everywhere else, because you can't afford to put trios everywhere. That's too much money, and you can't hang them. They weigh too much to even hang them on my ceiling.
Some of the challenges with Atmos is you need sort of a lower profile, lighter speaker for some of the spots.
And then what you don't think about is not only are you trying to match the sound of 2 different models of speakers together, at least they're in the same family, so there's a lot of similarities to how they sound, but every one of them is in a different location in the room, which makes every one of them sound different. Mm-hmm. And every one of them is facing a different direction, which makes everyone sound different. And then every one of them, even though we lasered all of them to be exactly the same distance, they're down to 1/100th of a foot, the exact same distance from the listening position. There's still minute distance differences that we have to put delay in. So we measure the round trip delay from the listening position to each one of the 15 speakers, and every one of them gets a different delay value. So that way the phase coherence of 15 speakers is flawless.
Right, because you want the sound coming out of all the speakers to reach your ears at the same time.
At the exact same time.
Which I guess, what's the theoretical, it's like a point in the center of your head?
The theoretical point, I believe, is behind your head, is where they shoot for.
Yeah.
And what that does for those that don't know is, if you've got my right side speaker and my right rear speaker, and I want to pan a sound somewhere in between those, there's a phantom center in between those two speakers, just like there is in between your left and right. When you put a kick and a snare and a vocal up the center in your stereo mix, there's no speaker there, but it's coming from right there.
Yeah.
And the better your placement is for your speakers, and the more well-tuned everything is, and the better your room is, the more accurate that spot right in the center actually is. But now you have those that's called a phantom center. And now you have those phantom centers everywhere. There's a phantom center between the right side and the right rear, but there's also a phantom center between the right side and the right top rear and the right top front.
And those need to be lined up just right too.
And all of these phantom centers have to be perfectly lined up. And so it's not something I'm convinced you could do very well yourself without bringing someone in to tune it. But man, watching them work their way through the process and decide where the speakers were going, and then watching Josh tune the stuff.
Wow.
It's art.
Wow.
It's art. And it sounds unbelievable.
Rock your music production with the updated Complete 15 bundle from Native Instruments, featuring Contact 8 and expanded hardware integration. Whether you're crafting cinematic scores, EDM bangers, or experimental soundscapes, Complete 15 gives you industry-leading synths, sampled instruments, and creative effects to bring your ideas to life. Contact 8 introduces powerful new tools like chords and phrases for instant inspiration, the Leap tool for dynamic looping, and Conflux, a hybrid instrument blending organic and synth textures in real time. And with Machine 3 now available, you'll enjoy even tighter integration with Machine Plus and the latest NKS-supported hardware from brands like Akai, Korg, and Novation. Plus, Complete 15 features revamped Massive X, Guitar Rig 7 Pro, and Isotope 11, helping you shape, mix, and master with ease. Use the code ROCK10 for 10% off at nativeinstruments.com. Howdy, Rockstars. We're back now for the jam session. My guest today is Colt Capperrune, joining us here at the Video Podcast Studios.
Yes, sir.
Recording studio, Rockstars HQ. I can't even say the name of my own place right. You ready to jam?
Yes, 100%.
Okay, so we were talking about Atmos, among other things. So some of the questions I wanted to ask you is like, what things can we carry over from mixing in stereo when we switch to Atmos? And probably the question before that is, before we jump into a big investment, can we start on headphones and start learning?
Absolutely. I think that's exactly how everyone should start. And I want that to be crystal clear, and I hope I make this come through on my own videos. I don't think people should just go out and drop a bunch of money on Atmos. I don't think people should feel like they have to. I don't want people to feel like they're being forced into it. I don't want people to feel like the industry is passing them by if they don't do it. I think if you have loads of disposable income and you just want to blow your money, then by all means do it. If you have clients that are requesting it and it makes sense from a business perspective, sure, do it. For everyone else, you should just start playing around with it. Get some headphones, get some AirPod Maxes, because those are currently about the best thing, I think, to listen to them on. And just start messing around with it, panning stuff around.
Learning how it works. How does this thing work?
Just open up a session of a mix that you've done and learn how to create objects, and learn how the panner works, and learn how 914 buses work, and how 914 surround reverbs work, and just start playing around with it and wrapping your head around it. And if you get to a place where you're serious about it and you want to release some stuff, then go ahead and mix it in headphones, and then maybe book a studio for an afternoon and just quality check it in a real room. Right. If you're actually going to release stuff, I do think people should hear it in a room.
Yeah.
But and then if you do that over and over and over, and then it makes sense, then put an Atmos rig in for sure. As far as the things that are similar, the thing that comes to the mind first is the quality of your edits, because there is nothing to hide behind. Every click and every pop and every edit And like if you don't crossfade something, you've got that acoustic guitar track and like, oh, that edit, you can't even hear it. It's behind a snare drum. Well, when you put it over here, it's no longer behind the snare drum. It is glaringly obvious. So just making sure the tracks are like ultra polished and ultra cleaned up are I think is really important.
That's cool to hear. That's the first time I've heard anybody bring up the reveal of the details in the edit in each sound.
Now
it's by itself now in speakers.
There's pros and cons to that. On the pro side of it, I always say that, and I always felt this way for the last 2 decades making records, I'd take my $5,000 Gibson acoustic and I'd mic it up with a bunch of crazy Neumanns through 1073s. And it's a $15,000 recording chain and it sounds absolutely amazing. And then when I mix the song, I have to hack it and carve it so it doesn't step on the vocal or the piano or everything else. And now it becomes a shaker that lives over here. And that's all that acoustic guitar is. But now in Atmos, we don't have to do that. I just put it over here and it sounds like a $15,000 recording chain because it lives over here by itself. And that it's making music without compromises. And that is my favorite thing about it.
That's amazing. So that is partly because it's the only sound coming out of that speaker. So it's not competing for space out of the speaker cone. Really,
exactly.
And then I imagine there might still be changes or artistic decisions you might make to sculpting it a little if just production wise it's
100%
not what you want in there. But the other thing that's interesting too is it means that if it doesn't need the surgical EQ to fit when it's off in a separate as an object over here or in a separate speaker bed, I guess it would be
just in a different location, then that means even in a headphone version of that, as you're experimenting, theoretically, you should be able to move it over to a different location 100%. And have it not compete. So that might be a first thing I would experiment in headphones is like listening to a normal stereo mix and then take a thing that doesn't sound good in there. And before I reach for the EQ, just move it over here and see if all of a sudden it sounds better. That's pretty widely accepted as the best way to do it. You should do placement first and treatment second because even in headphones and in the room, just placing something changes how it sounds. And like, there's times where like, oh, this shaker sounds a little congested and a little nasally and a little just closed off. Just lift it up just a little bit and it will totally change how it sounds. And you may not even need EQ now.
Wow.
That, and then the other thing is like the general concept of instead of there being a left and a right and a spectrum from left to right, that left and right now becomes the actual left and right, the sides. And so the spectrum is now this. It's a big U shape that wraps around you.
Yeah. So Rockstars, if you're listening to this, he's like, hands all the way on your sides for left and right.
Yes.
And then imagine a big semicircle arc in front of you all the way to the front center.
The spectrum is truly when you have headphones on the left and right side of your head in a giant U shape around the front of your face.
Yeah. Isn't there also an element of it that's like near, medium, far, and far, or does that have to do with the room tuning?
No. So when you're deciding on objects, you can have the objects have different distances in terms of off, near, mid, or far. I personally use near on just about everything, except for I've kind of landed on drums and electric guitars and the lead vocal turning that off because I can then, I feel like I can place it with just a little bit more accuracy in the depth domain. But yeah, there's no right or wrong with this. And what's wild is we're kind of in the wild west of like back in the day when the Beatles put the drums on the left and the bass guitar on the right because stereo was new.
Right.
That's where we are right now in Atmos. There's no there's not really standards. No one really knows what the best way to do it is just yet. And it's really fascinating to watch how different people are handling different things.
Well, and standards change, and technology changes and evolves what's possible too. I mean, I just had David Glasser on and we were from Airshow Mastering and we were talking about he's remastered all the Grateful Dead catalog or at least all the albums.
Yeah.
And so one of them was an example of it was probably like a Cooper Time Cube or some weird phasey stereo effect on a vocal and other details like that I think may have been a certain, certain understanding of, what did you call it? You said I forgot the term you used, but like, pre-established methods of stereo that applied at the time. But then with the future technology and the remastering capability, all of a sudden it probably leaps out of the speakers even wider in stereo because it's possible now.
Absolutely.
So in those respects, I can see how it's like what you're saying. It makes sense. It's like things are sort of extreme in the beginning as everybody's experimenting and figuring out what Atmos could be.
Yep.
And then some things become kind of understood and established.
Yes.
And then technology in the future changes anyway, so then we break all those rules.
And then it becomes, we'll get to a place where there's some acceptable practices, we'd say, like you don't put drums in the left and the bass in the right very seldom anymore.
Right. Although you want to.
But then it becomes, how do you break those rules in a creative way?
Yeah.
How do you use those norms or those kind of accepted standards to then be creative in the right elements at the right time?
Okay, awesome. Now this one is a question that I wrote down, if I can find my cursor here, from one of your stereo tracks.
Okay.
So Rockstars, we have Colt's playlist in the show notes, as we always do.
Thank you.
And so you can click through and go listen to all this great work that he's doing. Although I don't believe we have an Atmos playlist from you yet. So if you got one, maybe you can get it to me later and we'll put it in there.
I do. Yeah, there's only, because you know how long it takes for songs to get released from
when you complete
them.
You just built it. So it's
so there's 3 or 4 of them up right now, but there's new ones coming out like every week or 2. So.
Okay, awesome. So from the stereo one, Beyond Here, Feel Bad is a great example of like the big snare sound and mix. And I hear that in a number of your recordings. You really appreciate that stuff.
I do.
So a couple of thoughts. This question is like, what can you tell us about getting that kind of sound? I probably asked you this last time. It's just a great sound too.
Thank you.
Snare drum tracking to capture it, mixing tips, and then what do we do about that stuff in Atmos?
Yeah. Those are all great questions. Okay, so in the tracking phase, that song, the drums for that song were recorded at Lester Estelle's studio. He's the drummer for Kelly Clarkson. Unbelievable studio. I don't remember. I believe that snare drum was an oak snare drum that he has. Very, very interesting snare with a deep, thuddy snare tone to it. And then I don't remember what microphones were up, but the general thing that we do is there's usually always like usually an Audix i5 on the top, something random on the bottom, and then stereo pair of overheads that are rooms, usually spaced pair, and then usually a spaced pair of room microphones halfway to the end of the room, and then usually an XY pair of room microphones at the back end of the room. And then they would have went through some Neve, definitely some Neve 1073 preamps. And then in the mix, it was just about how do I enhance the low end the maximum amount before it starts to sound worse. How far can I push the thuddiness of these snare drums? I really like thick, powerful snare drums.
Yeah.
How hard can I push that? And so in the mix, it would have been a Cappy LC25 EQ with just gobs of 100 and 200 hertz, just however much I could dump into it. And then in that song, it would have been a Cappy FC526 compressor, both hardware, 500 units. And then from there, it would have went to a parallel drum bus that had my TubeTech LCA2B compressing on the parallel, and then just spreading those room microphones around. So that way it just created the most amount of size and ambience. And then the room reverb, I think back then I was maybe using the Valhalla Room. That's probably...
So it's like finding a clever blend of a digital reverb plugin or an effect that you can blend in with the room makes.
Yep.
Yeah. So what should we think about when it comes to that kind of stuff? Because I mean, I can't tell you the number of times I like pull something, I'm like, that doesn't sound right.
Yeah.
You know.
So
do you have to stumble through a lot of that doesn't sound rights before you find out what works?
Yes. The one more thing I'll say about the processing on that was, in every single drum session, no matter what, and I have these samples for every drum kit I've ever recorded over the past 21 years, I make the drummer do one shots. As soon as we're done with the song, we get one shots. And then I will take that snare sample and I will duplicate the snare track and put a sample on the duplicate. And then depending on how organic or not organic the song is, I will either blend the duplicate or blend the sample or not. But I always use that snare sample to trigger the reverb. Even if I don't use the sample in the actual mix, I always, all of the snare reverb on every song I've ever mixed.
So there's a consistency to how it hits the verb.
That, and so that way there's no bleed in the reverb. I don't want hi-hat in my snare reverb.
Right, and cymbals crashing.
And cymbals crashing, exactly. And so I will always use the snare sample to trigger the snare reverb. And from there, yeah, presets suck. Like almost universally, like I can't find a preset of a snare reverb that I like on any reverb I've ever tested.
Yeah.
So for me, it's about how do I make a snare reverb feel alive throughout the song? How much space does it need to take up lengthwise in terms of like it has to obviously completely die before the next snare drum, but usually before the next kick drum even. And then how do I make sure it's EQ'd or sounds in a way where it's not stepping on the vocal? And how do I make sure it's EQ'd or not in a way that's not stepping on the actual snare drum? And so usually that means like cutting some low end out of I put so much low end in the actual snare, the reverb needs some of that cut back out.
Yeah. What about, is there pre-delay? Would that be typical?
Yeah.
You think on something like that?
Yeah, somewhere between.
Have it happen a little after the
just a
attack
little
of the
bit.
snare?
Yeah, somewhere between maybe 15 and 40 milliseconds of pre-delay usually. And that changes on the song. I've went through a bunch of different snare reverbs. I was using the Valhalla Room for a long time. I am on the FabFilter Pro R now, which is fantastic. And I've recently got the Liquid Sonic 7th Heaven, which is just a mind-bendingly good reverb. It sounds so natural and so real all the time. Those are kind of my favorites at the moment. The Valhalla, the Vintage Verb, and the Valhalla Room are obviously incredible.
Yeah.
And especially for budget reverbs, I think they're like $50. They're unbelievable.
Yeah.
So it's always a combination of that stuff.
I'm always like messing around, trying a little bit of everything until I narrow it down, which doesn't speed up my mix process. iZotope is truly amazing for mixing and mastering your music. Check out the new iZotope Catalyst series featuring Plasma, Aurora, and Cascadia. Powerful tools designed to supercharge your mixes with intelligent processing. These innovative plugins give you dynamic control over saturation, reverb, and delay, effortlessly enhancing excitement and clarity. And now Neutron introduces new modules like Clipper, Density, and Phase, completing your flexible, fully equipped mixing suite. Plus, the new AI-powered Mix Assistant helps you create a custom signal chain for your audio, referencing professional instrument profiles or your own examples, with easy macro controls to dial in a perfect mix. Use the coupon code ROCK10 to get 10% off Plasma, Ozone, Neutron, RX, or any of the fantastic plugins at iZotope.com. Okay, cool. Now, what about when it comes to Atmos? Maybe you're still in the discovery phase for that bit.
A little bit, but
what have you noticed so far?
It seems to be genre specific for me. If I'm doing a dense rock or metal thing, I kind of want the left and right. At least as far as
Daisy, the studio dog. You're probably going to catch her on the room cam here.
As far as drums go on a dense rock or metal thing, I still want the drums going through a bus. I still want them living in the front, left and right speakers sort of thing. So very little changes in the more dense a mix is, the less changes in Atmos for me. Yeah. The more organic something is, the more I start playing around with maybe I put the room microphones in the back of the room. Maybe I put them up in the heights a little bit so there's more sense of being in an actual room. Maybe I put the reverb in the sides so the snare drum happens in the front and the reverb happens on the left and right side.
So you mentioned EQing some of the body of the snare out of the reverb because it's already in the snare. So that might be, again, one of those examples where, maybe it gets to be in there.
Exactly.
If the verbs move to another location.
There's another trick where you can create 3 auxes. So it's really cool to do, where you create 3 auxes for your reverb. You put the exact same reverb on all 3 of them. Maybe you tweak them, but you can start with this. Put the exact same reverb on all 3 of them. On aux 1, leave it in the front of the room and use a 10 millisecond pre-delay. On aux 2, put it in the left and right on the sides and use a 30 millisecond delay. And then on the third one, put it in the rear of the room and use a 60 millisecond delay.
So it's like the verb's like swishing past you.
The snare hits, yes, and the verb flies through the room.
Wow, that's cool. That's got to be a lot of fun.
It's the most fun I've ever had making music.
And I'm curious, like, if we'll hear that stuff is obviously in headphones or not, but all good. It's cool to hear these descriptions for those of us that are going to experiment at first in headphones, to hear descriptions of what works in speakers.
100%.
So that we can go try them out right away.
Well, and what's also interesting about the headphone thing is it's almost a moving target, because every OS that Apple releases, it's a new algorithm for their spatial audio. The Dolby algorithm is changing all the time. They're constantly changing these algorithms to make the headphones sound more like the in-room experience. And when I first started listening in Atmos like 3 years ago, the headphones didn't sound very good at all. Now, if you're doing the mix right and you're paying attention to where you're putting things and you know what locations don't sound good in headphones and what locations do sound good in headphones, we've arrived at a place where my Atmos mixes are crushing my own stereo mixes in headphones, which is wild. I'm not the best stereo mixer in the world, but I'm not a slouch. And my own Atmos mixes are they're deeper, they're more impactful, they have more dynamic range, they're more space, the elements all sound better. It's crazy.
It's making it more fun to mix.
Yeah, so much more fun.
Okay, now here's a question I don't know if anybody's asked or if you thought about yet, but do you notice a difference in SPL level in the room and with a different attitude towards, like, you know, what's a listening level that you feel good about for long periods of time?
In a couple ways, yes. One, you don't realize it's deceptive how loud it actually is in the room. So you turn it up to what you think is a normal mix level, but when you've got information coming out of 15 speakers, it's actually significantly louder than you realize.
Wow.
And so luckily the room is tuned in a way and the Focal monitors sound in a way that, to me, I don't experience a lot of ear fatigue, but I do have to consciously lower the volume often. And then in addition to that, you're so unrestricted because there's no mix bus. There's no limiting. There's no mix bus compression. The low end, and especially in my room, it just sounds so rich and so full. And you just want to feel that more and more and more. And next thing you know, you're like, it is really loud in here. I need to turn this down.
You're like, am I a DJ?
I know. Yeah.
DJ Wannabe is coming out. Yeah, no, that's cool. And it's always interesting too, now that I referenced that, you know, this idea of like what's going on in Atmos for EDM stuff. I've listened and explored some things, and my AirPod Pros are one of the few places I can go check it out and hear the sound. I've learned now, you know, just with good headphones in the studio and just by forcing it to play back the Atmos mix, I'll hear an Atmos mix of it. It's just not always as it's not always as immediately obvious to us who are newly discovering this, because with the AirPods, you turn your head and you're like, oh, I see it's doing the 3D thing, versus headphones in the studio. It's not.
I don't particularly love that. So
I've yet to meet anybody who likes
that's the head track thing. And Apple, if you stumble across this podcast, please turn that off by default. I don't like the head track thing at all, mostly because it forces you, if you don't hold your phone right in front of your face, you're listening to it in a skewed perspective. And that's really weird. But yeah, it's an interesting thing. One of the things that I did early on, that NAMM that I saw you at 2 years ago, the flight out to that NAMM, I had AirPod Maxes on, and for 4 hours, if you take your iPhone and you have any sort of AirPods, and you swipe down from the top right of your speaker and you long press on the volume control of the headphones, it'll bring up your Atmos controls, and you can turn the Atmos on and off that way. That's where you would turn off head track or head tracked on or off, and then go back to the stereo version. So I downloaded a bunch of music, and I spent 4 hours going back and forth between the stereo version and the Atmos version on every song.
That or listening to jet engines.
Yeah, exactly. And because when I got on that plane, I was like, Atmos mixes don't sound as good in headphones. They just don't. They can't. It's impossible, right? By the time I got off of that flight, I was like, oh no, there's some Atmos mixes that sound way better in headphones than the stereo version. Why? And then that led me down this path of like analyzing, what did these people do? Where did they place everything? What locations work well? This shaker sounds really good in headphones here, and it sounds horrible in headphones here. Why does that, how do we get around that?
Yeah. And we've talked about this on the show here, but I'll just mention it again. In the discovery process, it's important to understand that you put on the headphones, you go into the settings, you make sure that sound check is turned on in Apple Music so that it's level matching. And I don't remember, I haven't explored like Amazon and Tidal and stuff, which I think maybe are also delivering Atmos
They
mixes.
are, yeah.
So I don't know where the settings are on that. But point being, you want to make sure that you're hearing the level match between the stereo and the Atmos.
Yep.
And then you turn it to like Atmos always on or Atmos always off, and just so that you're certain you're listening to the stereo or the Atmos. And then you get a real apples to apples experience.
100%.
Do that. And I wish it's still a little bit of a delay while it switches.
It is.
It'd be nice if it was like an instantaneous button.
Yeah. It's a little bit of a delay. And unfortunately, there's a lot of subpar Atmos mixes out there. There's a lot of stuff with the drums in the left and the bass in the right, metaphorically speaking.
Right.
And I think as the algorithms change and the OSs get update and it's more realistic in the headphones as we keep going down this path. And I think as us mixers continue to experiment and find out what things work and what things don't, we're going to get to a place where if you're listening in headphones, you might as well just listen to the Atmos version because it's going to be better. The dynamic range is better. The punch is better.
I'm already hearing a ton more stuff where when I flip from stereo to Atmos, it immediately sounds better to me in the headphones. Yeah.
It does sound... I sympathize with people that say that they've never heard a good Atmos mix in headphones, because it wasn't until I spent those 4 hours going back and forth and wrapping my head around. I literally got off that flight and I'm like, how could I possibly think the Atmos version sounds better? And I really believe it was just due to the space, not carving up that acoustic guitar to sound like crap, not carving up all the elements to sound like crap. The fact that they weren't fighting on each other, and the fact that like when I'm mastering stereo stuff, I'm crushing it to -5 LUFS, which is absurd. It's a brick when you look at the waveform, right? But in Atmos, the deliverable is -18. They'll literally reject it and you can't release anything louder than that.
Wow.
And so dynamics are back. The loudness wars are over.
Right. Now you can make artistic music again.
You can make artistic music.
So you got to write a great song though.
Yeah, if the song sucks, it doesn't matter how cool the Atmos mix is.
Yeah. Okay, so you make a ton of videos on your channel too. Rockstars, I encourage you to go check it out. It's just, the name of the channel is just Colt Capperrune?
Just Colt Capperrune,
yeah.
Yep.
So, and we'll have a link to that as well.
Thank you.
So you can go check those out. Some of the ones, just looking at some of the ones that are out there, you did one about the new tiny Mac Mini, which won't be quite as new as this episode comes out.
Yeah.
But you've been great about exploring. Like I remember you were doing like when the first Mac Mini M1 came out, and and I think you did stuff on laptops, and there's a new tiny one. So at the risk of this not being news anymore, what'd you find out about that little guy? Because it's incredibly affordable and it seems
it's
super
incredibly
powerful.
affordable. I'm really fascinated with tech in general. Marquez Brownlee, MKBHD, is one of my all-time favorite YouTube channels. But that Mac Mini, I think the base model Mac Mini for $599 is probably what 99% of people listening and 99% of people that watch my channel, it's probably the perfect machine for most of them.
Yeah.
If you're a prosumer, you're doing this for money, you do this commercially, then maybe bump up to not the base level, the next one up. But the next one up is more powerful than my machine, my M1 Max that I use all day, every day, that I never hit the limits on anyway. Like, it's such a powerful machine. And the fact that now you can get that for, I think the second level up of the new Mac Mini is like $1,200. The fact that you can get a machine, like, you've been doing this a long time. I remember when I used to only be able to put about 2 plugins on each track on a 40 track song, and then the computer, the G3 Mac that we were using, was glitching out and like wouldn't go any harder. And the idea that we can spend $1,200 and have virtually unlimited power is just, it's so crazy to me. The fact that what you can do with a $1,200 computer in your bedroom is insanity.
Yeah. Well, so for example, I'm using a laptop right now. It's a MacBook Pro, and I think it's an M2 that I've got here. I suppose I could pull it up, but it's just for the podcast in here. It is doing a double stream thing. So it actually is able to take my camera and your camera, go into the computer through actually hacking it together with double browsers.
Yeah.
It's bringing in 2 4K video streams, and it's uploading those effortlessly.
Yeah.
As well as bringing in audio from our microphones to the internet. Now, the internet's fast here, so that's sort of crucial. But, the capability of stuff like that, there's no way you could have pulled that off with the older stuff.
So whenever I do a dedicated video on a computer that I have actually in studio, I have this test Pro Tools session that I run, and it's 120 channels. I just print some pink noise, so there's actually audio on 120 channels. And then I always load it up with 2 EQs, 2 compressors, all stock plugins, so people can download it and run it on their machine and see what the CPU usage is. 2 EQs, 2 compressors, 2 instances of lo-fi, 2 stock Pro Tools delays, and 2 stock Pro Tools reverbs on every single channel.
How many channels?
2. So the 120 channels, 240 instances of reverb.
Right.
Which is crazy. And like these new computers, like my M2 Max MacBook Pro, it's like 27% CPU usage when I'm doing that.
So that's clever. So basically what you're doing is you're saying, look, here, I've got the new computer and I did this maxed out session and I'll show you what it does.
Yep.
I'm giving you the template. You can go download it, open it in yours, and now you can compare knowing, is it really worth it to get the new one?
Exactly. So that's
huge.
So you might download that Pro Tools session, and on your machine, it's 80% CPU usage. And on this new machine, it's 27%. And then you can be like, yeah, that's worth the money for me to upgrade. Right. Yeah.
And that's such a big deal because like there's so many times where we think about upgrading our studio or getting the next big thing. And the challenge is that like each of these purchases, especially if you get, $599 is a lot lower for a new computer, but it used to be like a major investment.
Big purchase, yeah.
And so like you kind of never knew. And I remember feeling like the only way I could, because this happened to me before, where somebody else brought their computer into my studio and I opened it up and I was like, holy shit, that session ran great.
Exactly.
So it's like it was that way, and I guess still is, where like the only way to really know if it's going to work for you is to see it in your own setting.
Unfortunately for most people is to buy it and then see if it works.
And then find out,
Yeah, I did that when I first left I was on a Mac G5 with a Pro Tools HD3 rig, the core card and the 2 Excel cards. And I switched to the trash can. This is in 2013. I switched to the trash can Mac Studio and an Apollo. And it was like, I have no idea if this is powerful enough to take the place of the HD3 rig, because that was a monster rig back in the day.
Yeah.
And luckily it was. And then fast forward to now I'm back on a Pro Tools HD rig, but like buying the Mac Studio when it first came out. When that Mac Studio came out a year and a half ago or whatever, no one had done any audio tests on it. I'm like, I'm just going to buy it and see how it goes. And so I bought it, did the comparison, did the video, and the Mac, for a truly professional recording studio, I think the Mac Studio is still, that's the one.
That's a good one.
That's
good
a great
choice
one.
Okay, great.
Yeah. But the Mac Minis are so incredible. If I was going to buy a computer right now today, I would be real tempted to go with the 2nd or 3rd level Mac Mini.
Do you think that even a baseline one would handle 2 video 4K streams in? No problem.
Yeah, the baseline
new podcast studio.
the baseline M4 chip is more powerful. I think I'd have to look at the data. It's more powerful than the M2 Pro chip, which is just, that was a monster chip itself. So,
are you ready to launch your career in the audio or entertainment business? SAE Institute Nashville, right here in the heart of Music Row, offers hands-on programs to prepare you for the industry. From studio production and live sound to audio for film and a whole lot more. You'll learn by doing. working with professional grade gear alongside experienced industry pros. If you're more into the business side of entertainment, SAE's Entertainment Business Program teaches essential basics like contracts and promotion to help you navigate the industry. With diploma, associate, or bachelor's degrees, there's a path for everyone. Plus, Career Services supports graduates as they take the next step. Want to see it for yourself? Immerse yourself in Nashville's exciting music scene and book a tour today at nashville.sae.edu or call 615-244-5848. And when it comes to things like video, have you found that it's the processing speed in the chip that it's also the video
GPU,
card,
yeah.
the GPU, right?
Yep. Yeah.
Whereas we used to always think it was all about RAM.
Right. Yeah. And a lot of people, even on my comments on my videos, they ask about that. And I'm like, I ran that trash can Mac Pro with 12 gigabytes of RAM for 10 years, and I never ran out of RAM. I wasn't doing a ton of virtual instruments.
Right. That's the big
and it was pretty terrible at video, but now I can export a 10-minute 4K video in 2.5 minutes on these machines.
Do you have experience with video in a Pro Tools session?
No, I've never done that.
Yeah, I've not found it to work great for me yet, so I don't go there a lot.
No, I've not done that yet. I guess that's a thing for like Hollywood productions, right? Like movies would be done that way, I guess.
Yeah, when you're composing to film or to picture,
all my video editing is done in Final Cut Pro. I started on iMovie because it was free and included in all the computers, and then eventually was getting serious enough about it. I needed to do some color grading, and iMovie that's not a thing in iMovie.
So for what it's worth, again, this is a recording show, but this tool that I'm using here, this Riverside, which is uploading all of our video and audio, it will let me just simply export it as a ready to open Final Cut session if I want to.
That's cool.
Too. But one of the things I never liked about doing audio, bringing it back to audio, Rockstars, about doing audio in the video app is it's like we're used to really having control audio first. And when we're doing a Pro Tools mix, we can put the plugins on it, we can tweak it, we can zoom in on the waveform, all that stuff.
So I still do that in Final Cut. So I have created my own audio template where I'm using all FabFilter plugins in my video editing. So it's I have a preset that is the FabFilter EQ, a FabFilter multiband compressor, and the FabFilter limiter, and that's my dialogue thing. And it's just a single click. I literally just, when I import the video clip, I grab that preset and I drag it on the video clip, and now it's there no matter what I cut up. So I've gotten to the point where like,
what if you want to tweak it, the settings?
Then I can just grab the EQ and tweak it, or grab the compressor and tweak it.
It'll still play out across all the edits and cuts.
Yep.
Yeah, that's cool.
Well, you have to do it before you do all the cuts.
See, that's the stuff that used to frustrate me in the video world. It's like, and it's kind of like, and everybody will appreciate this. The way that the internet world has adopted and adapted video, for making things like Zoom work, where you can have this back and forth and all this. But like audio seemed to always be a second consideration.
Yes.
Sure, a voice over a video thing. But like if we want to send good quality audio, you discover pretty quickly things like, I'm sending you stereo through the thing, but it's showing up on mono on your end and it's compressed and whatever.
Yep.
So it's very frustrating at times.
Well, and audio is the number one way to seem professional. Like if I took this 4K camera, you're shooting on a Sony A7C, which is a great camera. If you took that 4K camera and you just had me talking to it using the microphone that's built into the camera, it would sound terrible, and people don't take that seriously. And by contrast, you could take the crappiest camera in the world, a camcorder from 1990, and I'm talking through this microphone into it, and it will seem significantly better than it actually is.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, the audio quality tricks people.
Yeah, although ironically, I've also noticed that the reverse holds true, in that if you took a really crappy recording of audio and you just listen to the audio, you might be like, well, maybe I'm contradicting you, so I gotta watch out what I say.
No, you're fine.
But like when I'd record music or a band or something, and it'd be not a very good recording, and then I'd listen to it, I'd be like, it doesn't sound good. But if it was that crappy but accompanied by a video, I'd be like, oh, it's not, it didn't bother me so much.
Okay.
But that's probably just the video will slightly level up the crappy audio, but
For
it
sure.
won't. But the good audio will like hugely level up the crappy
Good audio
video.
would hugely level up a crappy
And that's
video.
that's kind of what I did for my stereo sessions channel at the studio when I brought what we had learned at Bonnaroo back to the studio here because we had done some video down there and it's all live 2-mix through a console.
Got it.
And I was like, I should do that here. And so for a year, I was putting out 2 videos a week,
Yeah.
music videos. And so all the audio was recorded through my best studio. So it was recorded on the vintage MCI
Nice.
Hotel California console.
Yeah.
And I was using the plate reverb and I might have bounced it off tape if I wanted to, and then I'd master it.
That's awesome.
But the video was like, I messed around with good video and working with some quote video friends, you know, and I was like, okay, I'm never doing that again, because it took like 3 months to get one song back.
Yep.
And so we pivoted and was like, you know what happens if we just use iPhones? You know, like let's just let it be what it is.
Yeah.
And so I really embraced that. It was like everybody who was there would shoot with their iPhones. It was like, doesn't matter if you're in the shot shooting with an iPhone in front of somebody's face. Who cares?
Cool.
It just looks like there's a party going on.
That's cool.
And then you taking all that and like trying to find artistic ways to
Yes.
edit it all together and make it interesting.
Yes.
And to your point, the quality of the video wasn't high, but it's really fun to watch and it's really engaging because the audio sounds great.
Exactly. Absolutely.
What does it mean the magic is in the mid-range?
It is something that I stole from Jack Joseph Puig.
Love it.
I saw him, and I've talked about this on the channel. I saw I talked about earlier in this episode where hitting F12 was the most mentorship I ever had. That was really until Pensado's Place came out.
Yeah.
Those early episodes of Pensado's Place, that was such a life-changing thing for me because then you got to actually hear what these dudes that you idolized, what they were actually doing, the gear they were actually using, how they actually mic'd something up.
Yeah.
And I remember it was episode 22. It's still on YouTube. You can search on YouTube for Pensado's Place episode 22. Jack Joseph Puig, he broke my brain in that episode back then, talking about compression, talking about the mid-range, just I must have watched that episode 15 times before I felt like I was starting to understand everything that he said. And he said, I remember him saying something like, the soul is in the mid-range, the cry is in the mid-range, and all the character is in the mid-range.
The cry, literally like a baby's cry.
Literally like a baby's cry. And that just was like, oh,
what about a dove's cry?
I don't know about that. And so that started changing my perspective on how to mix, and my mixes immediately started translating better everywhere when I stopped worried about how thumpy the kick drum was and how sizzly the vocal was and started focusing on everything. He was in that episode, he was talking about between like 600 and 2K, I think he said. I modified that from between like 200 and 4K is kind of where I'm.
You're like, dude, you left the snare button.
I know.
Boom out.
Where's the thump of the snare? And so once I started doing that, and once I got some NS10s back in the day, and once I got some Oratones, and they only show you like 200 to 4K. And then I just really started making sure that there was nothing I could possibly want to change in that frequency range. And then I would pay attention to 100 hertz and below. And then I would pay attention to 10K and up. And my mixes they just leveled up so immediately and so hard once I started doing that I was like, I have to tell people about this. And so I made that video.
It's great. It's great. And, I talk about that on here too, about learning about the power of mid-range and how it's the universal frequency for all instruments that helps our brains identify the instrument and what's going on musically and everything about it. Not
just all instruments, but every playback system. There is no playback system that won't reproduce mid-range.
And volume.
Absolutely. And
in fact, when you turn the volume down low, that's what you're left with.
Exactly. And the idea, at first this never meant anything to me. I would hear people talk about, the mix has to translate to the speakers in the ceiling of the grocery store. And I'm like, none of my shit's being played in the grocery store. Well, then it got to the point where some of it was, And I remember the first time I was in a gas station and heard a song that I had worked on. I don't even remember what song it was, but I was like, oh, that's my song. And then I was like, that kind of doesn't sound that great in the gas station, you know? And so like, I then realized that the speakers in the grocery store were a metaphor for your mix sounding good everywhere.
Yeah.
And when you focus on the mid-range and when you get that mid-range right, then it works everywhere.
Well, and also they're just like those little series wired ceiling speakers or something that don't reproduce anything much more than the mid-range.
Yep.
One of my mentors, Robin Eaton, who's been on the show, he and Brad Jones over at Alex the Great had produced Butterfly Boucher's record. And they took that record out to Hollywood, and I think it's in Hollywood. It was at Ocean Way, and they mixed it with Jack Joseph Puig.
Oh, nice.
And it was when I was out there too. So Robin was like, come on by the studio. So I got to go by and
that's awesome.
meet Jack and see the studio. And it was like this cool spot where you walk in. Man, it felt like you were walking inside a piece of art or something like that,
so
you know? And there was a little room off to the side with like misty blue drinks.
Yeah.
So you could just get yourself a little like mystical cocktail. But, and of course his room, the way it was laid out with all the crazy gear in the back and everything was really one of a kind.
Yes.
But Robin was talking about working with Jack and the way he would mix. And he made some interesting comments. He said like what Robin, discovered and transferred the knowledge over to me was this idea that like, there's more effects in it than you think. And every time you would press stop on the tape, all of a sudden you'd hear is like, because of all the compression and the way things add up, all of a sudden there's these effects and delays and reverbs come rushing to the foreground or whatever. And it would fool you into thinking it was like, oh, that's so much or something. But really, it was the just right amount
100%.
That in the final mix was working perfectly. And the other thing he said, he was like, man, he's so intense about mixing. He would turn the speakers down so low that you could barely hear them at all.
Yep.
And then he'd listen, and I was just like, what are you listening for,
I
dude?
know.
And now I get it. It's like,
I totally get it.
There's that you're listening to that super quiet mid-range balance of everything.
Instead of listening to all the low-level information like reverb tails, you're listening to all the highest level information. The first person I ever heard talk about that was Chris Loralgi. And he was talking about how he would turn his monitors down low enough that if someone was typing on a keyboard behind him, he wouldn't be able to hear what was happening.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, wow, that's really quiet. And then when I started doing that and I started figuring out, especially for rock and modern country and stuff like that, if you do that on any pair of speakers, but especially like some Oratones or NS10s or something, or any Barefoot or Focal with focus mode or whatever, you turn it down where you can barely hear it. And if you can hear the kick and the snare and the vocal, probably in a good place.
Yeah. Well, it's become one of my favorite techniques now, especially, well, it does a couple of things. One is I feel like there's pressure off my brain when I work that way. Because of what you said, you're not sort of overwhelmed by information coming at you loud out of the speakers that you're trying to filter and process mentally to hear into like, oh, what should I be listening to right now? You're just like, I put it mono and turn it down on the Oratone. Or the Avantone is what I have. Although it's actually behind my extra screen. So sometimes I'm like, maybe I should the speaker actually hit my ear directly, or is it okay that I'm only hearing it like what comes around the screen too? But I'll turn it way down, and then it makes it so much easier to listen and be like, okay, I don't hear a lot of that, and then grab faders and start moving it around.
Exactly.
And you make bold moves like that too.
Yeah. And like, I think that's something that you can get fooled with mixing loud. Is like, oh, that guitar solo is loud enough. But then when you turn it way, way down like that, and the vocal stops and the guitar solo starts, just as an example, and the whole song like falls apart and all the momentum falls apart. Oh no, that guitar solo needs to be way louder, like, or whatever the case may be. Yeah, you start making some bold moves for sure. And I like that.
Yeah. Are you recording your own music or other people's music in your studio, but you're having trouble figuring out how to get your mixes to sound great? Do they sound weak and distant or lack punch and clarity? Well, I've got a gift for you to help you take your mixes from sounding like basement demos to sounding a lot more like professional mixes. And it's my free course called Mix Master Bundle. This course will show you how to get pro-sounding mixes from your home studio with free and stock plugins in Pro Tools. And the best part is, these mixing techniques will work for you in any DAW, whether you're in Logic, Cubase, PreSonus Studio One, Reaper, or anything you can think of. Are you ready to make your best record ever? Then go to mixmasterbundle.com to get started for free now, and you can find the clickable link in the show notes of this episode. As with any of these reference points in making music, there's only so far you can take each reference point. Mm-hmm. You don't want to overdo it.
Yep.
Because have you ever overcompensated at the low level and then you turn it back up loud again and you're like, oh man, I just fucked it all up, whatever.
There's so many times I have pushed a mix just a little too far and then I'm like, oh, I fucked up the whole thing. Nowadays, I'm not quite there in Atmos just yet, but especially in stereo, there's always a point. And I don't even know what it is. I won't even know what move I made that it just clicks. I don't know if it's a mental thing. I don't know if it's an intuition thing. I'm like, that's it. It's done. And I've gotten really good about listening to that, like work. And sometimes the mix falls together in 30 minutes. And sometimes I have to beat it into submission over 4 or 5 hours. Mm-hmm. But eventually we get to a point and I'm like, that's it. It's done.
Yeah.
Just print right now, send to the client.
There's another reason. It's one of the powers of taking breaks so that you can come back with a fresh ear and get a new perspective on it and decide, because you might be done and not know it too.
I have talked a lot about that on the channel, but I've never figured out a way to package this into a video, the concept of speed mixing, where theoretically, the second you hit play, you begin losing perspective.
Right.
Literally, the very second you begin working, you start losing perspective.
I would add that there's a couple of different aspects to that perspective. There's the perception perspective, which is like artistic. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And that includes things like, what do you think artistically? Like how does it feel, look, sound,
how does
whatever.
it convey the emotion?
But then there's also the aspect of time goes into that too, where it's like the repeated listens that you do means you've been listening to that same creative idea
exactly.
and it was super extended. You took a perfect 3-minute pop song and you turned it into a 30-minute piece of garbage. And so how could you have a perspective on it?
Yes.
And then the other part of that number 2 is there's the physical sonic, like your ears can only handle so much volume
100%.
before they lose their physical ability to transfer useful information.
To be analytical. Yeah. And so when I'm mixing, I'm very adamant about I already know the song ahead of time. I don't ever mix the first time I heard the song. I've uploaded the session the night before, I've prepped it and organized the tracks, or I've done something on it before I actually start mixing. Excuse me. So
in other words, by the time you're mixing, you're familiar.
I'm familiar
with the track.
Yeah. And then it's usually faders just a little bit up so I can hear everything. And then it's kick, snare, get those slamming, and then bass guitar, and then vocal. Mm-hmm. It's almost always. Yeah. And then get all of those crushing as fast as I can. And then just faders up to balance everything else. And then from there, it's all gut. It's I close my eyes and what's the first thing that jumps out of me that needs changed? Oh, that piano's a little muddy. Fix that. Close my eyes. What's the next thing? Oh, that acoustic guitar is a little shrill. Fix that. And it's just gut reactions as fast as I can.
Yeah.
And sometimes you get to the end in 30, 40 minutes and I'm like, it's incredible. Sometimes 6 hours in and I'm like, this is a pile of steaming dog crap. And it's not a reflection on the recording or the mix sometimes, or the song. Sometimes you just have to beat them into submission.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. The other thing I was going to say about the mixing quiet too is I find it incredibly valuable during the production and tracking. Mm-hmm. So we finish something and everybody's so excited about it. And everybody's looking at you as the engineer, okay, you got to bounce out a rough. Well, guess what? They're going to listen to that rough for
8
a long
billion times.
Yeah. And, and if it's your own music, you're going to listen to that rough a billion times too.
Yep.
And so if you sort of screw it up right now, you're not going to be happy with yourself.
Yep.
But yet you're toast because you just worked on all day on the song or whatever it was. And so you don't have the bandwidth to like crank it up and really dive into a mix right then. That's why I find it so incredibly valuable to do the mono thing, turn it way down.
Yeah.
I have enough energy, plenty of energy to do a quick, I can tell that these need balancing out.
Yeah. For sure. I often will do everything in my power to not give them a rough that night. I will print, depending on what time we get done, I need to go eat lunch or I need to go to bed, and I will send you a rough mix as soon as I can.
Yeah.
And I started doing that because as a mixer who mixes my own productions, but also mixes for many other producers, it paints the mixer in a box if the rough sucks.
Right.
Because if you get to the end of that session and then they just whip together some crappy rough mix and then the artist hears it 8 billion times, now there's things about it they love just from repetition.
Mm-hmm.
And then the mixer becomes totally backed in a corner. And I, in my experience, often can't do what is probably the best thing for the song because people have just, they got demoitis. They've just heard the rough so many times they can't hear it any other way.
Right. Yeah.
And so I try to, if I'm going to print a rough, I really try to make sure that the rough is at least representative of where the mix needs to go.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's great. And I attempt to do that. I'm usually, it's great if you're working on a project where it's within the budget for you to just simply come back in later and do the rough. When I work quickly with my friends, or with a lot of clients too, it's not like that. It's like, it's just there's so many hours of a day.
Yep.
And so I'm like trying to squeeze it in at the very tail end of the day, which is tricky. But I've learned many tricks to try and get us more in that ballpark.
Absolutely.
One of them is just simply dialing in the stereo bus, having plugins queued up on the stereo bus. I actually have the master track in Pro Tools turned off while we work.
Oh.
And then when it's rough mix time, I just enable it and it's already like kind of preloaded with all the stuff that was working on previous stuff.
That's a good idea.
So it immediately like throws all the music up into the ballpark volume.
Yeah.
That's probably going to work.
I'm going to steal that.
Steal it.
That's a good idea.
Well, dude, it's great having you on the show again, man. It's super fun to do this and talk about all this stuff.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me. And sorry it took so long for me to come back. You've been on me. Man. You've been asking me for a long time. And I've been like, I really, really want to. And there was just always something happening.
I'm patient. I'm a very patient individual. I just wait. Keep trying. Wait until it works.
Well, I love the podcast and I'm honored to be here.
So we got a closing question here.
Okay.
You've answered it before, but I'll ask you one more time.
Okay.
This is hypothetical. We get to take the Wayback Studio machine. You go back and find young Colt who wants to be a rock star. Or maybe you're just trying to figure out how to do that 360 on your skateboard still. I don't know. And you say, listen, dude, here's the single most important thing that you need to know to be a rock star of the studio yourself one day. What advice do you feel like going back and giving yourself now?
I have a feeling this is probably what I said last time I was on, but maybe not. Figure out what it is that you do and how long that takes per song. If you're a mixer, how many songs can you mix in a day? If it's one a day, well, then you need 5 songs a week to mix, and that many songs per year to stay busy. Figure that number out, whatever it is you do and how long it takes and how many of those things, whether you just play guitar on records, whether you write songs, whether you mix, whether you master, whatever, figure out how much of that you need to do in a whole year in order to actually stay busy. And then 15x that. That's how many people you've got to know and be in front of in order for them to be able to hire you enough to stay busy and pay your bills. I wish someone would have put that to me like that, because it really showed me that like, oh, I need 600 clients a year in order to pay my bills.
Right.
And when you put it into that perspective, you realize, oh, I need to know 5,000 people in order for 600 of them to hire me. I wish someone would have laid it out like that for me, because I struggled for a long time in my trajectory of my career. And it was way less about the technical skill set of making music and way more about not understanding the promotion that it takes to run a successful business.
In other words, you were doing the quality.
The quality was there long before I had
quantity.
any idea how to run a business.
Yeah. I think that's great advice. I mean, I remember learning early on, people would talk about, some people I'd talk to, they'd talk about cycles. So an indie artist maybe, at a certain point would make a record, and then they'd go support that record, and then 2 years later they'd be back to make a record. So if you could have the right amount of indie artists coming back to you on a 2-year cycle, it could all line up just right or whatever.
And that's exactly how it works. It's also an interesting thing where, like, especially back in the day, the era that we're actually from is we were doing full-length records. Like now I work almost exclusively on singles.
Right.
But for most of my career, it was full-length records, 10, 12, 15 songs at a time. And so a band would book out the studio, and you would spend a month, 2 months, maybe 3 months with this band. And you became like, you had real relationships with these people, for better or worse. And then all of a sudden they would disappear, and you wouldn't even talk to them for a year and a half. And then they would come back, and then you would spend 2 months with it. That was always the wildest yo-yo of emotions to me. Yeah. Where like you made like best friends. Yeah. And then they were just gone over and over and over.
Yeah, I remember noticing that. I mean, and they weren't always 2-month records for me. They might just be even a week, but or even a weekend. It's just so intensive that you felt like you really got to know people. And then try doing a podcast, and you spend 2 to 3 hours with somebody, and then you're like, "Hey, man, I'm Lidge. Who are you?" Try that.
I don't imagine how you do it. At this point, I can't really remember who I've met and who I haven't met, to your point. And so now when someone introduces me to someone, I always say, "It's great to see you." I never say it's great to meet you, because I've likely met this person before.
You know who said that to me once? And that was my takeaway, was Sheryl Crow. Although I think she said, "See you again." Okay. She might have said that because that might have been what stuck with me.
Got it.
So it wasn't a great to meet you. And I was like, wow, she must meet so many people.
Oh, it'd be impossible.
It's the smart move to just always go and say, "It's great to see you," or "Great to see you again."
100%. Yeah. Because you never want, I would never want to make someone feel uncomfortable or like it was on them. But you go to NAMM, and if I talk to hundreds and hundreds of people, and then I go back a year later and see that I'm not going to remember all those people. There's no way,
I go up to people and I just say, "Hey, it's Lidge, from such and such." Yes. And I always lay it out like that, because I figure I wish everybody did that for me.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it makes it easier to remember. Oh, yeah, that's right. Oh, we met in that context. Oh, now I totally remember.
Exactly. That's great.
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole study of that in the study of memorization and stuff like that. There's this has probably come up recently on the show. There's a book called Moonwalking with Einstein, which is a highly recommended read, and it's about memory championships. There's an entire, nerd sport of memory championships. Yeah, and people learn how to do things like shuffle 6 decks of cards, memorize the exact order of all the cards, and then get it exactly right.
That's so cool.
And it's all just techniques, and they all involve visualization. Okay. In a space. So you would take a physical path that that you've walked your whole life, and it so well you can visualize every turn. Yeah. And you put these like crazy images at each moment on there. And the more lewd and sexual and bizarre they are, the more likely you are to remember them.
That makes sense.
So it's like this combination, and then you develop your own code. That's way too complicated for remembering people's names at NAMM. But if you want to remember that many cards and 6 shuffled decks,
that's really fascinating. I need to be better about that. I'm notoriously bad at remembering people's names. I remember people's faces pretty well, but I'm horrible about names.
I remember the context.
Yeah.
I remember what we did, or what it was, or what we were talking about,
That's amazing. I need to be better about it.
Yeah. I mean, but no, I don't always remember names right away.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't say each other's names all the time.
No, we've been sitting here for 2 hours, and you've only said my name once, and I've not said your name
dude
once.
A number of times.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm a hey man, hey dude. Great.
So really, when I call everybody dude, when I see them because I didn't remember their name, I'm actually calling them by their name because I always called them dude.
Exactly. I'm in the exact same boat. I love it.
Or dudette, whatever it is.
I feel like dude is a non-gender specific term. I call everyone
I try
dude.
to use it all the time. I just like it. I don't know. Where did it appear for me? I don't know. It goes back to the 80s.
Yeah. Yeah.
Dude, where's your car? No, it was already old news by then.
It was, for sure. For sure.
Dude, where can the rock stars go? Where would you like them to go check out your latest thing? What are you excited about? What if they need to reach out to you, or what if they just got more questions?
Absolutely. Follow me, subscribe to the YouTube channel. It's just Colt Capperrune. The Instagram is just Colt Capperrune. I'm doing pretty much everything on those two platforms. If you get on Apple Music and search for Colt Capperrune, my playlists will all come up. In addition to in the show notes, I believe there's a playlist. But that's pretty much it. If you want to get in touch with me, shoot me a message on Instagram or email me, just my Colt Capperrune at Gmail.
Awesome.
That's pretty much it.
And then, like you said, Rockstars, we got the stuff in the show notes. So thank you for watching this. I hope you enjoyed this. Yes. If you did and want to catch more of these videos, kick that like button, but be nice to your computer while you do it.
Smash it.
2024
style.
I decided to start telling everybody to kick it.
Just kick it.
Just kick it.
I love it.
And subscribe, and I don't know what else you're supposed to do. And also, by the time you watch this, YouTube might not even be a thing anymore. So we'll just be
when is this coming out?
I don't know. No, not that far. Not 10 years from now.
Make sure you like.
No, but I mean, they'll be watching it again later.
Yes, of course. Make sure you like and subscribe, and make sure share it with your friends if you enjoyed it.
Yeah, and then what else was I going to say? I forgot. Oh, drop a comment in too.
Yes.
Let us know where we got it right, where we got it wrong, and if you got any more questions, and I will endeavor to seek out your comment.
I'll jump into the comments too. Once it goes live, I'll reply to comments.
All right. Thanks for watching, Rockstars.
Thank you for having me.
Dude, thank you for being here.
Yeah.
Cheers.
That was great.
Thanks so much for listening to Recording Studio Rockstars. If you enjoyed the show and want to help make it better, then please share this episode with your friends on social media and leave a rating and review on iTunes to help the podcast reach more rock stars like yourself. You can click directly over to iTunes or go to rsrockstars.com/review for an easy explanation. And remember to hit the subscribe button to keep up with weekly episodes. And if you're ready to make your best record ever now, then head over to Recording Studio Rockstars Academy, where you can start with my free course at mixmasterbundle.com. Thanks so much for listening, and thanks for being a rock star. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is Recording Studio Rockstars. Now, go make great music. Recording Studio Rockstars would like to give a big thank you to our awesome sponsors who help make this episode possible: Isotope, Native Instruments, Adam Audio, and SAE Institute Nashville. And remember to take advantage of our special coupon codes at isotope.com, nativeinstruments.com. Use the coupon code ROCK10 for 10% off any plug purchase. If you enjoyed Recording Studio Rockstars, please check out our sponsors using the links in the show notes. These are all things I highly recommend for your studio. They're going to help you make your best record ever. And please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, because it's a great way to help support this show. And leave us a comment below to let us know what you thought of this interview or who we should have on as a guest in the future. I would also like to thank our fantastic team here at Recording Studio Rockstars, Vlad Weselchenko and Liz Hulitskaya. Thanks so much for watching and listening, Rockstars, and we'll see you in the next episode. Cheers.